This is a nothing. Yes, did they play perfect? No, they still win. Yes.
What are you doing if the Celtics win the championship?
If the Celtics win championship, I might break my sobriety. I might act up.
We did it! You got him.
All the way.
Celtics versus Heat. Celtics in what?
4.
Celtics versus Knicks. Celtics in
4.
You got Celtics in 4?
Celtics.
Hell yeah.
Use a vocab word from a couple years ago. It's mind-boggling.
That's it, GOG. Let's go. What do you think tonight?
You think I'm worried about the Warriors? I ain't worried about the
Let's go, baby. 18, baby. Load up the boat.
Why would you say that?
Because
I'm not. No,
recently he's putting up games like.
Above our head for the players.
Literally right now.
But I think when Marcus, especially Marcus, when he got traded, I think that was a wake-up call.
You think right now
Rob,
it's still New York?
I do.
And when I think of the Celtics dynasty, honestly, one of the first names that comes to my mind is actually Brad Stevens.
What is up, everybody, and welcome to the Celtics Talk Weekly postgame show. I am your host, Seamus Zarlingo, and next to me tonight we have Nick, Franco, and Justin Lowe. On the night of the trade deadline, of course, not the eve of the trade deadline. We're post-trade deadline right now, but the Boston Celtics, 120 to 127 against the Dallas Mavericks tonight. Unfortunately, the Boston Celtics drop a horrendous game at home. And really from the get-go, it looked like the Celtics were just running in the mud, didn't have the energy to catch up with the Mavericks. And after a few nice games against the Mavericks, thinking all the way back to the NBA Finals last year, the Boston Celtics finally fall to the Dallas Mavericks in an awful, awful game after the trade deadline. This was a completely different vibe from what we saw the other night against the Cleveland Cavaliers on the road, where the Boston Celtics came out and, of course, just really dominated the Cavs early on in that game, and then throughout held the lead and grabbed one of their best wins of the entire season. Then the Celtics go, of course, back home and lose. Not the worst game of the entire season, but when you're down 27 points, not too many good things you can say from this Boston Celtics team. So without further ado, we all know how this show runs on this program. Justin, we'll start with you. Initial thoughts on this just atrocious Celtics loss.
Pathetic. It was pathetic. Whit Grossbeck, you owe 20,000 fans a 100% refund on this game tonight, and I'm dead serious. It was pathetic. There was no excuse. It was inexcusable to come in and drop this game. A already severely undermanned Dallas Mavericks team who hasn't had any camaraderie together since this Luka trade, an upside-down franchise, beside themselves franchise since. And you made Klay Thompson look like prime Golden State Klay Thompson. You let Kyrie Irving walk all over your logo tonight. It was a despicable game. It was ridiculous. It was ridiculous. There's no excuse. Takes away any sort of value that you've seen over the last 4 games. Takes away any excitement from Sunday night's win in Cleveland. It was an absolute atrocious game tonight. Celtics should really, I could never do what they do, and I'd embarrass myself if I tried to do it. But for what we know, what they can do, it was embarrassing. It was an embarrassment of a performance tonight from the Celtics. Credit to the Stay Ready group. Came in and all of a sudden turned a 27-point deficit into a 7-point deficit. Unfortunately, time ran out. But if you were looking at the box score, you'd see, Celtics lost by 7. It was a tight game. No, Celtics got obliterated tonight on their home court. Now have lost 10 home games this year, 10 home games. One of the best, actually the best road team in the association, 20-6. Yet something about playing underneath 18 championship banners can't motivate this team at home. I don't know what it is. 20,000 screaming fans, sold out crowds every night, national TV games, playing under 18 championship damn banners. They can't win a home game against a severely undermanned team. I'm not saying the Celtics aren't going back-to-back, but if you're looking at this game, it's a pathetic game, an absolute monstrosity, pathetic, ugly, disgusting game from the Boston Celtics tonight. There's not a single, I can't think of any other synonyms, and if I could, I can't say them on camera. I have had it up to here. If anybody knows me, and you guys specifically inside Celtic Talk Weekly, I have given this team the benefit of the doubt through the ugliest of games. The ugliest of games, I have given this team maybe too much credit. And I've had it about up to here with this team right now. I'm not saying we can't go back to back. I'm not talking crazy, trade Jaylen Brown, trade just Tatum. We're not going back to. In the moment, right now, tonight was embarrassing, and there should be a refund on tickets. Seriously, there should be. We've seen worse home losses for sure. But at no point should you be getting booed off your home court consecutively. This is the most I've seen the Celtics get booed at home. It's happened many times this season, and it's ridiculous. The Celtics need to figure out their home problems because guess what? A top 4 seed in the Eastern Conference holds home court advantage for at least one playoff series. And I get it. It's regular season. It's February. I'm sure the Celtics will figure out at home. But right now, it's ridiculous. There should not be a just above 500 team at home. They're 5 games over 500 at home, if I'm not mistaken. That should not be a thing. Celtics got to figure it out, especially against teams that are severely undermanned, especially against teams that they should be beating. In the Celtics tonight, dropped the ball big time. There was no energy from the start. 7. Celtics finished with 14 turnovers. 7 of them were in that first quarter. 7 of them. They got mollywopped from the start. They got waxed off their floor. Ridiculous, Franco.
I mean, the only thing that this team could have done was just the team wasn't making their shots. They were late on rotations. Defensively, completely lazy effort on the defensive end. The fact that the team was able to show up with 8 minutes remaining in the bottom 5 of your rotation as the one leading the charge is embarrassing. And trying to carry off the momentum you've gained over the past 4 games, beating the number 1 seeded Cleveland Cavaliers. And the last time you played the Dallas Mavericks in TD Garden, green and white confetti was falling on their head. If they think that's going to happen again and even want a chance of that happening, it's not going to happen in a game 4 or 5 because they're not playing up to the level that they need to. If they're going to hold themselves to a high expectation, it's carrying momentum forward, being able to go on 5 or 6 game win stretches. And tonight was an important win if they could have pulled it off. You were inching closer and closer to the Cleveland Cavaliers. And we're talking about how the number 1 seed and number 2 seed don't matter, but I feel like this year it's more imperative than it was last year because there's a lot more competition in between those games, and you're risking the chance of running into a team like the New York Knicks in the second round or the Cleveland Cavaliers, who both bolstered their roster today, adding Daniel Hunter. They could be DeAndre Hunter.
That's a Rob right there.
Yeah.
What was it, Drew Patterson earlier this season?
Yeah.
Hey, dude, no disrespect on Patterson, man. He's the only player tonight to show up.
Yeah.
One of the only ones, man.
Yeah, we'll get his name right tonight. I think being able to the Dallas Mavericks came in with a lot to win tonight because they've been getting doubted. It's after the worst trade or one of the biggest trades in midseason history happening a few games ago. They get mollywopped by the Cavaliers right after the trade happened. And I think that it was the first look at them having a fresh start and a great opportunity for them. Klay Thompson is going to be expected to have a more significant role on this team than when Luka was on the team. He's going to have a lot more opportunities to shoot, be a more versatile player there. So this was a big game for them, and they just wanted it more, and we say that a lot about the Celtics losses, that the other team just wants it more. But that's not an excuse. You need to be able to have the same energy game after game.
Franco, you just mentioned uh, the Cleveland Cavaliers, Boston inching closer and closer to Cleveland. What about the New York Knicks inching closer and closer to Boston? I mean, this is Saturday night is an essential game if you're the Boston Celtics. Interdivision opponent. This is a team that essentially started in the offseason, started to build a foundation around beating solely the Boston Celtics. This is the team we talk so much about, the Cleveland Cavaliers and their hot start to the season. And this New York Knicks team, and still in my eyes, is what stands in front of Boston. If any team stands in front of Boston, it'd be the New York Knicks. But Celtics suffered a treacherous loss tonight at home, and I believe that pulls them a game and a half to 2 games above the New York Knicks, which, again, yes, it's only February pre-All-Star break, but how long are we going to start bringing up the month and bringing up the date and bringing up the time period until it's too late? And we're sitting here and all of a sudden it's April. It's April. We have 3 games left and we're still fighting for seeding here. So, this game tonight, the Celtics had a great opportunity coming into this game, had a beautiful opportunity, winning 4 straight games, 3 of which on the road, coming home, beating the Cleveland Cavaliers, and then coming in, and they just get smoked. It's not like they lost. I know we look at the scoreboard, fellas below us, and we see a 7-point loss. Say, man, oh man, it came down to the foul game. We couldn't hit shots down the stretch. No. The Celtics actually played better down the stretch, but they were down by so much that there was no final stretch in this game. And there is no excuse for that. Seamus, I know we're going to get in depths of this game, but just in terms of, just closing out my initial thoughts, I've really am kind of, and I said this in the first half in that Philly game, if you guys remember. It could have been early second half because the Celtics didn't start that third quarter particularly well, if you remember, in Philly. And that my breaking point with this team in terms of, I'm not going to give them the benefit of the doubt like I've been. I feel like I've been so light on these guys. I've been giving them the benefit of the doubt. I've been making not excuses for these guys because I have been very pivotal on, I don't want to hear the second nights of back-to-back excuses. I don't want to hear the injury excuses. I don't want to hear it's only January. But at the same time, I've given them the benefit of the doubt too many times. And tonight I'm not giving them any sort of satisfaction. This was a disgusting loss at home.
Well, Justin, you talk about the lead the Dallas Mavericks held in this game, and we look at the lead tracker tonight. That 100% indicates the Celtics run down the stretch, and the biggest lead of the night for the Dallas Mavericks, 27 points. The Boston Celtics, they only lose by 7 points in this game, and you think, well, if the Celtics only went down by 20, which ultimately isn't a huge ask. It's not a huge ask to say, the Celtics just don't go down by 20. Maybe the Celtics actually claw their way back into this game and win, because you see that spurt there in the fourth quarter. But I'll also note that spurt in the fourth quarter was mostly ignited by the bench. It was ignited by the guys coming off the end of the bench who actually wanted to go out there and play. And the Dallas Mavericks let the rope go a little bit there down the stretch. But you see the biggest lead was in the fourth quarter. It was at the beginning of the fourth quarter, and you notice, too, it keeps going up and up and up for the Dallas Mavericks until the Celtics bench, of course, comes into the game. And that really indicates the Celtics didn't come out of half with energy, doesn't indicate the Celtics. You look at really each quadrant here. The Celtics, starting the second quarter, allowed a 10-3 run right off the bat. And then out of halftime, you see the Dallas lead extend there. And then to start the fourth quarter, so each start of each quarter, even the first quarter, look, every start of each quarter, the Dallas Mavericks went on a run over the Boston Celtics. And what have we talked about all season? We've talked about the Celtics really getting out to hot starts and really setting the tone, especially when you're coming out of half, when you're coming into a quarter, when you're coming into a game. Celtics didn't do that at all tonight. And really the starters are to blame for this loss, because the bench down the stretch of this game actually saved the score and made it look a lot better than what it was. But this was a trouncing by the Dallas Mavericks. And it was the score at one point. You saw the 27-point lead on there, but it was embarrassing. And I really do believe at this point in time, this loss is a little bit different than some of the ones we've seen in January, but it's still on the same vibe of it's different in the sense of it's coming off of a 4-game winning streak, and we just won in Cleveland, and we just came off of a good win. But at the same time, it's of the same vibe in terms of the Celtics. They came out, they didn't have the energy, they didn't have the intensity, they were not hitting on all of the details. Defensively, it was terrible tonight. I mean, really what we saw in Cleveland the other night was just lockdown defense for that game. 105 points for one of the most prolific scoring offenses in the entire league. And then tonight, 127 at home for the Dallas Mavericks, or I should say at home for the Boston Celtics. They come home and allow 127 points to the Dallas Mavericks. I mean, you could see the defensive effort out there. You could see the defensive technique, the positioning, everything that each player was doing out on the floor. And it was particularly all the starters. They were going through the motions on both ends of the floor. And that's really what gives us the same vibe in this game as we saw in January. But I will say there is a difference in this in terms of just came off of a 4-game winning streak, which is we haven't seen since November. And I do believe the Celtics, they put a lot of effort into that game in Cleveland. Should not excuse for this game tonight, but I'm now interested to see how they will come out against New York going ahead, because really I see the schedule. This is what the Celtics seem to do. They seem to be a switch flipping team at this point in time, where they go, oh, well, we're playing the Cavs tonight. Oh, we're showing up to play. Or, oh, they play the Thunder and they show up to play in the first half of that game. Any opponent they see really on the schedule that they know, oh, this could be a playoff opponent, they really get up for. The Mavericks, I know we faced them in the finals last year, but it almost felt like we came into this game expecting to win and just, oh, we didn't really care about our opponent. Yeah, Kyrie Irving's on the other side, but a lot of the players on the Celtics now don't even have a history with Kyrie Irving in Boston besides Tatum and Brown. And really Brown is the only player at the time still, or from 2018-19, and Kyrie Irving's time in Boston, they really had a problem with him. And I don't really know how much of a problem he still has them half a decade later. And the rest of the Mavericks team, I think what was looked at tonight, and the TNT broadcast kept saying it, oh, they don't have Anthony Davis. Oh, they don't have Caleb Martin. Well, that excuse can't be made, because the Dallas Mavericks they've never had those two players yet. So they can't be like, oh, they're without Caleb Martin. And thank goodness we didn't see Caleb Martin, because then it would have been a 30-point plus loss tonight. But they're not, that Caleb Martin and Anthony Davis haven't played for this Mavericks team yet, so they don't even know how they're going to play with those players. But I feel like the Celtics almost looked at this matchup and went, oh, this is the post Luka Mavericks. Oh, they're kind of depleted. Oh, they lost in Cleveland the other night. Oh, we have a big win in Cleveland the other night. And they just kind of came through and thought, oh, we can walk through this game. And I believe too, I almost felt like I was becoming complacent myself, because I'm looking at this game going, oh, the Mavericks only got Kyrie out there. I know they can be a tough matchup for the Boston Celtics, particularly in not last year's finals saying they were tough, but we've seen them a lot. And even that last game in Dallas we covered on here, us three, that game was actually close early on. The Mavericks were actually playing well early in that game, had a lead in the first quarter, but then the Celtics just ran ahead in the third quarter. The Mavericks are still a tough matchup for the Boston Celtics, but I almost felt like coming into tonight, I'm like, there should be a fifth straight win right here. I mean, come on, we're facing the Dallas Mavericks at home. We just came off of a great win. It's deadline day. Come on, folks. Instead, we see the same old Celtics from January. But for me, I think this team is just a switch flipping team at this point in time. And the starters, they were the ones to blame for this game, because the bench, talked about it before post game, should they have come in earlier at that point in time? Joe Mazzulla, throw in the bench ahead of time. Maybe if we have Jaden Springer tonight, who knows? Maybe it's a little different. We'll never have Jaden Springer again unless there's a reunification. But maybe, just maybe. If
we didn't have Torrey Craig tonight. If they want to use the Anthony Davis excuse, we didn't have Torrey Craig. So I guess that's all.
Big loss for the Celtics. No Torrey Craig tonight.
That's only fair. But I mean, Seamus, you're 100% right. But man, I don't know. I don't know what to say, man. I just this ticked me off, and there was just a comment about the defense tonight, fighting over screens, and there was just no resistance defensively tonight. There was zero defensive pressure tonight, resistance anytime Boston even alluded to a little run, it was immediately shut down by a shot. And there was just no run in the Celtics tonight. Despite the final 9 minutes, I'm talking about when the core guys are in. No disrespect to the Stay Ready group, because even the Stay Ready group against Dallas kept their starters in towards the end of the game, and Boston made that run. But in terms of when our top 6 or 7 guys were in tonight, there was zero resistance. There was zero comfortability. There was zero flow within the offense. And very quickly, our 7 first quarter turnovers turned into 10 points for Dallas early on. And you gave any and all momentum to the Dallas Mavericks in that first quarter. And what did I tell you guys, especially against teams like the Philadelphia 76ers, when Paul George and Joel Embiid sit out? These guys have nothing to lose and everything to gain. This is a team, Dallas Mavericks, who just traded away their franchise superstar player, their most notable Dallas Mavericks since Dirk Nowitzki, maybe already only 25 years old, already one of the greatest Dallas Mavericks to ever play, as I mentioned earlier on our trade deadline special. This team right now is dysfunctional. They don't know what they look like with Anthony Davis and at full strength. They don't know that. They don't know what they look like. And they had nothing to lose tonight. Dante Exum coming off of missing 40 straight games. No Anthony Davis. Obviously, Dwight Powell's out. Washington's out. Lively's out. 3 of their big men depths are out. And the Celtics just get steamrolled. I mean, it's not like Dallas hanging around, short-handed and hanging around. No. And it's not even like the Celtics were hanging around. There was zero hanging around tonight. Look at the lead tracker. They get obliterated. They just get obliterated. And there was zero resistance defensively. Dallas, somehow, their biggest guy on the court most of the night was 6'7", and they were killing us on the glass all night long. Boston couldn't finish around the rim for anything. This was easily, for me, one of the worst games of the season. I don't know if it tops the Christmas game, and I don't know if it tops that Toronto game, but it's certainly up there for me as one of the worst losses of the season. And I think maybe it's just because I finally hit my boil point with this team. Again, don't twist my words. And the media likes to twist words. Somehow gonna find out that I said this team can't go back to back and all that crap. But seriously, I think I've hit my point of patience with this team. I think I think my point of patience is completed with this team. Give it up, Cornette sucks. No, but I will say, and this is Joe Mazzulla's fault. At the first time, I was like, Luke, what are you doing? But this was clearly in the game plan. Luke Cornette was over helping on Klay Thompson about 40 feet away from the basket, and it happened about 5 plays tonight. And I don't know what that was. If it was once or twice, I'd say, Luke, what are you doing? No, that was clearly in the game plan tonight, and it created all sorts of mislapses for the Dallas Mavericks and opportunities. I'm not trying to make excuse. Oh, meow, meow in the house. Look at that. Meow, meow. I don't know where my cats are. But no, Franco.
Post-game appearance by Meow Meow, finally. We've heard her a million times. She just didn't want to show her face on camera. She never does.
Face reveal.
Here we go.
I'm
no cat mask tonight, Franco, I swear.
No, Franco.
That's only for special occasions.
Ratings have been up. It could scare the viewers away.
Yeah, that's only for special occasions, and tonight wasn't.
If we beat New York and you run the streets of New York, you can break out the mask. I'm giving you permission. You can break out the mask for 1 second, a quick show. But no, man, I stand on it. My patience definitely boiled over tonight for this team. Just laying down at home. I think it's ridiculous. And to me, Ishketa looked horrendous tonight. He's probably the only stay ready group guy that I think. I mean, this guy can't finish around the rim. This guy can't catch. I don't know. Xavier Tillman. Celtics were down by 27 points. And Xavier Tillman somehow lasted the trade deadline. And Obviously, Daniel Tice is not coming back to Boston despite heavy rumors. We'll get into all the buyout targets, and we'll get into all the trades a little bit later on. But in terms of this game, there was zero defensive resistance, and there was zero offensive purpose tonight. You want to see the Celtics play with a purpose. Tonight, they did not do that.
No, can Kata grab a rebound by the rim, please? I mean,
No, Kata has butterfingers, and I love Kata. I love Nemi. Like he had a great start to the season, and maybe he just needs more time. And but butterfingers.
Good, Franco.
He's just usually in the wrong place at the wrong time. He's just really doesn't seem like he's in like chemistry on the.
It doesn't matter if you score more.
Right.
Watch the games. Like don't read the box score. Watch the games, please.
He's just shifting around. Like tonight was a miscue with Cornet, and I will say that was a defensive lapse. And the Celtics have had some questionable matchups recently. I think they've been pulling out the centers too much, and I think
you guys hear this? No. Okay, never mind. Go ahead, Frank.
Oh. Well, yeah.
I don't know why y'all are smiling on here.
Celtics centers are trying to get too far out.
No, there's no inside joke. Trust me, there's no inside joke.
Go
ahead, Franco.
Oh. Franco, go.
I was talking the whole time.
Dude?
Oh, I was going the whole time, but yeah, I think this was just seeing defensive lapses in the team. You would see Cornet trying to contest Klay Thompson, which allowed him to look like 17-18 Golden State Warriors Klay Thompson, and really get those open looks, and allowing Najee Marshall to have wide open looks as well. Kyrie was doing a great job facilitating. I praise the Mavericks for kind of figuring out what is going to work for them and really building a chemistry after such a challenging trade deadline. And I think Nico Harrison definitely has his head on a swivel when he's around the Dallas arena right now, especially after that trade. And they're just, I'm just hoping to see this team really bounce back with this New York Knicks team coming up. And this is a challenging schedule heading into the trade or the NBA All-Star break, but it's essential that they finish off strong.
I know exactly what you guys were laughing at, by the way. Now, it is an inside joke. It is an inside joke. But I'm on the inside now. That's what it is. That's how it is.
Seamus is like Michael Scott. Like I'd love to be a part of an inside joke one day. Like, I mean, here's the thing with the Celtics. You look at the schedule. Schedule favors the Celtics before the All-Star break. Is Meow is killing you right now. Two of the last three
she's
games.
like, I need my nightly pets. It's time for pets right now.
Two of the last three games before the All-Star break are on the road. One in Miami and one in New York. Those would be two phenomenal wins for this Celtics team. Obviously, I still think beating the Cavaliers is important. But I that is ridiculous. That is ridiculous. That is, I'm sorry. This caught me off guard right here. It's not Meow is begging Cornet to bounce. That's insane. I don't know where this Cornet hate is coming from. I think it's forced. And it's crazy. Out of all the people to hate on, it's Luke Cornet. I don't know. I gotta
we already settled this Luke Cornet debate last year. I mean, come on.
I just think it's an
NBA champion. He's solid. He's people expect way too much out of backup centers and backup players. I will say that. They expect him to come into the game, average 15 and 10. It's just not how it's gonna be.
He leads the league in net rating since December 11th. He's Phil. He plays his role to perfection on this team. He does everything. I don't know why. I'm not going to defend Luke Cornett any more than I already have. I mean, he's spectacular in a Celtics uniform, and I think if you were to play Tillman over Cornett, you were to play Nemish Queta over Cornett, throw in Anton Watson, an undersized big who's a rookie on a two-way, you're nuts. So there's
Andre Drummond, like he suggested either. I don't think you're seeing more of a better result out of that either, even if he magically appeared on the Boston Celtics.
No, I think Luke Cornett is perfectly fine in his role in this, and he's helped Boston in so many different ways.
Well, another player who's been perfectly fine in his role is our player of the game tonight, however. Peyton Pritchard, our player spotlight, our SeatGeek player spotlight. Of course, everybody, go use that code Celtics Weekly at checkout for 20% off your first purchase at SeatGeek, the official sponsor of the Celtics Talk Weekly post-game show. But tonight, Peyton Pritchard is our player spotlight presented by SeatGeek. 21 points, 6 rebounds, 6 assists, 1 block out there, and then he was 9 of 15 from the floor, 3 of 9 from 3. Not a wholly efficient game from Peyton Pritchard, but ultimately Peyton Pritchard, he was really the only Celtic out there that we could have given player spotlight to tonight. Maybe Jaylen Brown, you consider it, but
No.
Peyton Pritchard, he was really, I mean, it was really the numbers for Jaylen Brown. But in terms of Peyton Pritchard, I believe Peyton Pritchard deserved this player spotlight tonight because of his energy and his effort, and of course, his ability to put up another 20-point game off the bench. It's just a shame that I believe the Celtics are actually 0-3 in the last 3 games that Peyton Pritchard put up 20 points in. And there was a charity 3 down the stretch that got him over that 20 mark, but it seems like the Celtics are kind of wasting these performances from players off the bench at times, specifically Peyton Pritchard. But tonight, Peyton Pritchard, he did come out with energy, and he was one of the only Celtic players that actually play with energy, and that's really been the theme all season long. So your guys' thoughts on Peyton Pritchard tonight?
I mean, it's Peyton Pritchard. it wasn't easy pickings tonight for the player spotlight award. I mean, we got to shout out our sponsor, right, guys? Peyton Pritchard, obviously down the stretch, helped lead the Celtics team to a near comeback, but fell short. But I mean, we talk about it in these losses, in these recent losses. It stinks that, we talk about how, great Cornett has been and great Pritchard has been. And at times, shouting out D White as of late, it's really hard to single out individual performances when the Celtics put up such a stinker. It's really hard to, and again, shouldn't have had to rely on a Peyton Pritchard 21-point night. It shouldn't have happened. It shouldn't have happened. You rely on a 21-point Peyton Pritchard game, it's not going to do you good. And the starters have to be better. I've been on their ass for quite some time now, and it's getting a little bit ridiculous when it comes to this starting lineup and these slow starts. And you got to wait for a guy like Peyton Pritchard to come in. And great game from Pritchard tonight. Phenomenal game. Shot 3 of 9 from 3, but he was 6 of 6 from 2-point range. So 6 of 5 or 5 of 6 from 2-point range, whatever the number comes out to. But he was spectacular tonight.
Yeah, tonight he really stepped up in the final moment for this team, and whoever used or sponsor SeatGeek tonight really should be using. You should have gotten $20 off in the first place after they walked out of the building, because if you stuck around during those last 8 minutes, it's good for you, because you saw Peyton Pritchard really carry on a team with momentum on the offensive side, leading to a 14-point run, 14 points unanswered as he was subbed in with the Stay Ready group. I think tonight he was one of those players that really brought some great energy towards this game. He had a lot of mismatches on the defensive end, so that led to a couple of lapses, but that also goes along with game plan, and defense in basketball is a 5-person thing. You can find ways to cover up those lapses. Payton Pritchard was usually in poor positioning and also late on rotations when there were passes out to the wings and up at the top of the key. So they weren't really getting it hand up in the shooter spaces, and which led to the Mavericks getting their momentum. But I think Peyton Pritchard being able to bring these performances off the bench, it, like we've said, is a luxury for the Celtics and not something they should be relying on. I think Peyton Pritchard is we. I don't think that Peyton Pritchard is a all-star at any point, nor do I think we've ever said that. But I think he's a good candidate for Sixth Man of the Year, and performances like this are definitely a good calling for his case.
Mm.
Yeah, Peyton Pritchard, he's always the consistent presence off the bench now. Even whether or not he's scoring or not, he's always bringing that energy to the floor and really bringing that effort. And defensively too, I think Peyton Pritchard this season has been a lot better than he has been in the past, and that's really because he's in his 5th NBA season. And Peyton Pritchard ultimately, I mean, you said it best, Justin. It was slim pickings tonight for the player spotlight, because in a game like this where you're down 27 points and you come back and make it a 7-point affair, there's really not many players out there that we want to highlight individually, because when the team loses so badly, these individual performances really do not matter whatsoever, because they don't lead to wins. They simply do not lead to wins. But we are going to move on here, and I'm going to give out a little bit of a promotion here, because earlier today, we had our annual CTW trade deadline special. Go check that special out on our YouTube. We were live for 2.5 hours earlier today while the trade deadline was passing. Talked about a lot of trades, but I'm turning this post game here into the trade deadline special part 2, because we still have a lot of deals to talk about. In tonight's game for the Boston Celtics against the Mavericks, let's put that one behind us. We've got a big New York game coming up in the future, and let's actually talk about some trades from the Boston. I should say, first, we should talk about for the Boston Celtics. We're going to stay on the topic of the Boston Celtics, then we're going to stray away from the Boston Celtics, going to other teams. But we're not actually going to talk about a trade first. We're going to talk about a buyout signing for the Boston Celtics, of course. The Boston Celtics signing Mr. Torrey Craig this evening while they were down 27 points in the fourth quarter.
Oh, we were only down 11
by a ton to the Dallas Mavericks. Okay. I wasn't sure.
down
I
11.
know we were down a ton at the time.
I think it was during the first quarter that it happened, first or second.
Okay, so it was earlier in the game. We weren't being trounced yet. We were loading. It was loading for the game. But maybe that's why the Celtics, they kind of who knew? They maybe took their foot off the pedal. Like, oh, we got help coming. We don't want to give out too many things against the Mavericks tonight, because Torrey Craig is coming on the horizon. But for real, the Boston Celtics, they go out and make an acquisition at the trade deadline without actually. Well, they do make a trade in trading away Jaden Springer for a conditional second-round pick, top 55 protected. We talked about that earlier on the trade deadline special. But this evening, the Celtics go and acquire Torrey Craig, who was waived by the Chicago Bulls earlier this week, and Torrey Craig will provide a little bit of bench help with the Celtics. He'll provide a little bit of versatility, somebody who can hit the three-point shot every now and then, can really defend. He's been sort of an NBA journeyman, started his journey out with the Denver Nuggets, of course, and then from there just kind of flopped around the league, went to the Suns, then he was on the Bucks, back with the Suns, and went to the NBA Finals, of course, with those teams. And he's played a role in rotations for other teams around the league, Chicago as well, coming from Chicago now. And he's played a role for other teams around the league. Now, Torrey Craig, how big of a role will he play with the Boston Celtics is still very much a question up in the air, and it probably won't be a substantial one. But this does give the Celtics another piece off the bench to come in and fill minutes for Brown or Tatum when they're on the bench. And of course, Torrey Craig comes into the game, and it just gives the Celtics another forward body, I should say, another wing defender other than Sam Hauser. Sam Hauser is not known for his defense whatsoever, But Torrey Craig, he's a better player on that side of the ball than Sam Hauser. And I think it does give the Celtics a little bit more versatility and depth off the bench. We'll see if another move is still on the horizon, still one more roster spot to fill. The Celtics did have to fill this roster spot by a certain deadline, and they do it by signing Torrey Craig. So what are your guys' thoughts on the buyout signing by the Boston Celtics?
Well, we figured it'd be a wing, as we talked about earlier in part one of the Celtics Talk Weekly Trade Deadline Special. We had some options out there for sure. We had the Pickens. Celtics had about $12.8 million to play with. The details on Torrey Craig's contract have not been released yet. I'm sure we'll find them out in the coming hours. But Celtics didn't have a crazy amount to work with, but they did have a decent amount to work with, and they had 2 open roster spots, one of which had to be filled by the 14th of February. So the Celtics wasted no time, added Torrey Craig. Yes. Nice. Seamus's kisses. But no.
Not to you guys.
No kisses tonight.
No kisses. You're going to make Franco blush.
These aren't for the Celtics.
But this is, and we mentioned names like Lonnie Walker. We mentioned Torrey Craig, of course. We mentioned obviously Daniel Tice as well, who just recently went on the market with the Oklahoma City Thunder, releasing him today. So there were some notable names that the Celtics could go out and acquire. PJ Tucker as well. And Torrey Craig was one of the names that we talked about. We spent a decent amount talking about earlier this afternoon, and a terrific 3-and-D wing for the Celtics coming in. Torrey Craig, known for his perimeter defense, but also is a just slightly below 40% three-point shooter. I believe since 2022, he is a spectacular 3-and-D wing type player. Great guy you can have coming off the bench behind Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. You have your big man depth, whether you like it or not. You have your big man depth. Luke Cornett, Nemish Queta, Xavier Tillman, Al Horford, Kristaps Porzingis. You can throw in Anton Watson as an undersized big as well. You have plenty of big man depth on this team. It's the wing depth that is slim pickings. You know, after Sam Hauser gets very, very thin, obviously trading away Jaden Springer a couple of days ago. So I like this move for Boston. I think it gives them depth. It gives them longevity. You get a spectacular defensive talent, a 40% three-point shooter to go along with that. That's going to be terrific. We really brought him in for his defense, but if he can hit that three-point shot, that's gonna help this team a lot. It's gonna space the floor out. It's gonna really pair well, and he's gonna play well alongside guys like Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Kristaps Porzingis. Now, to answer the second part of your question, Seamus, what's the role going to look like for Torrey Craig? Well, I don't know that yet, because the Celtics roster is already so deep. We're only in the regular season, and we know that the depth usually slims down to about 7-8 guys come playoff time, and that's a luxury if you don't know where he lands in this roster. I don't know if he immediately jumps into that top 7 to 8 guys. I'm not saying that happens, but at the same time, this is a great time for the Celtics to kind of figure that out. It's sounding like he is probable for Saturday night in New York. He will travel with the team, and he will have his physical in the next couple of days. He will wear the jersey number 12, as that was an open jersey number. So
Grant Williams got to live up to the hype.
There is an opportunity that we do see him at least suit up for the Celtics on Saturday night in their game against the New York Knicks. But as far as the role, listen, guys, we knew no matter what, whether it was throughout the trade deadline, whether it was the buyout market, we knew that this was going to be the 14th and or 15th man on the roster, that this was not going to be a significant needle threading move. That means the Celtics won or lost the NBA title, whether that meant they were going back to back or not. This is not what that is. I will say it's a great addition to this team, and I think it adds tremendous depth and definitely, I guess, increases your chances more than decreases it for sure. And it was also a very solid counterstrike to what the Cleveland Cavaliers did this afternoon, which from a basketball perspective, basketball fan, one of my favorite moves and fits was DeAndre Hunter out to Cleveland. I think Cleveland is missing that wing. I really do. Their wing depth is treacherous. Karis LeVert, who is injury prone and really hasn't lived up to the hype this past year and a half, like he did in his first stint with Cleveland. Niang, who is a constant mismatch and just a hassle player to have on. It's just he wasn't giving you anything. And essentially, in my opinion, he was one of the main factors of why Cleveland never got back into the game against the Celtics a couple of nights ago, because anytime Niang was matched on Tatum cooked him. It was just undoubtedly. And you guys remember Game 6 against Philadelphia a couple of years ago in that fourth quarter, Jason Tatum ate Niang up. And obviously you got Dean Wade coming back from injury. Isaac Okoro is still there. So that gives some really good depth to Cleveland as well. So I think the Celtics, this is great. If it wasn't Lonnie Walker, it was going to be Torrey Craig. And I think Boston did a tremendous job at filling out that 14th roster spot. I'd be very surprised if Brad fills in that 15th spot. He likes to have that flexibility. He likes to have that freedom. He is eligible to convert a two-way guy, whether that's Peterson, Davison, or Watson. So I think Brad likes to live with that breath, with that extra little breath, that little inhale. And solid move for the Celtics. Obviously, the Celtics could have used Craig's defense and shooting tonight, but that wasn't the case. So maybe we'll get to see him in New York. But overall, this is a very, very, very solid signing for the Boston Celtics, Torrey Craig.
It's definitely going to be a key signing moving forward. And one of the biggest concerns for the Boston Celtics, and one of the things that opponents will always match up with and also take advantage of, is the lack of defensive depth at the wing position for the Boston Celtics. Sam Hauser is usually the biggest target on the Celtics defensive end, and usually he has done a good job of matching up with those and has been able to take on some matchups and be able to have a few key plays this season. But Torrey Craig gives you that sense of comfort and a more consistent defender and a much more versatile player. He's someone who's able to get rebounds for you, being able to cut down low. He's an interior scorer with alongside having some good 3-point skills. He's a very well-rounded player, and one of the players I was eyeing for the Boston Celtics to bring in during this buyout market. And I think that he slots in just around where Sam Hauser is in the rotation. So I'd say around the 8th or 9th man to come in. I think you might see him as frequently as Hauser, and definitely gives you a more situational rotation. You can, if you need 3-pointers, you can go with Hauser. If you need a defensive stop, you can go with Craig. I think he's going to be something that you can really work with, and he really completes this team going forward with the rotation, and I feel confident with what they have going forward.
You're really looking across. Go ahead, Justin.
No, I sorry, I just got to cut loose here in a couple minutes. Just to go off of the Torrey Craig signing, to put it into perspective, if you want to maybe compare and contrast to recent mid-season signings, I mean, this clears the Xavier Tillman signing, trade signing. This clears the Mike Muscala signing. It's clear, depending on how it is, this could clear the Jaden Springer signing as well. We just didn't really see the consistent minutes out of Jaden Springer. You want to go back and maybe even some off-season acquisitions as far as, Lamar Stevens and Delano Banton. Like, this is, for how, the Celtics can't really do much in the buyout market, in trading. Like, they really are restricted with their money right now. And this right now, we need to see it transpire on the court. But just going off of, statistics and fit and culture, like this guy right here is, in my eyes, the best in-season acquisition the Celtics have landed in a little bit. This 100% He doesn't even have to step on the parquet yet in this clear Xavier Tillman and Mike Muscala signing.
Well, yeah, looking across the Celtics roster right now, Torrey Craig fills a legitimate need for the Boston Celtics
Absolutely. Yeah.
because really you can break basketball down into three positions, right? There's five slots, but really three positions you have. And you have subcategories of all these positions. You have bigs, you have wings, and you have guards. That's pretty much it. And then you can break all those down into subcategories of them their own selves. Well, from the big man category, the Celtics are clearly set. They have Kristaps Porzingis. They have Al Horford coming off the bench. They have Luke Cornett. You have Kata, and you have Tillman right there. So those are five bigs the Celtics undoubtedly feel comfortable with playing in the rotation, and they could all slot in for each other and give the Celtics a different look. From a guard's perspective, Jason Tatum is actually the main ball handler in the Boston Celtics rotation. I mean, you could look at White, Holiday, Peyton Pritchard. Those are all guards for the Boston Celtics, and they make up one of the best guard rotations in the league. However, Jason Tatum is arguably the Celtics' main ball handler. So if you really factor in Tatum into that equation, you have Tatum, you have White, you have Holiday who can handle the ball, and Peyton Pritchard as well. So you have those four guards, and Tatum as a guard, but he really does play as a guard out there. You have those guys all in a row, but then you go to your wings, right? If you're the Celtics, if you go to the wings, a little thin. It's a little thin. Now, Jaylen Brown, he could also be in that guard category as well, but he almost plays more as a wing on this team. After Jaylen Brown, who do we have? It's Sam Hauser. Sam Hauser, he really has struggled this season doing what he's best at, which is hitting that 3-point shot. And if Sam Hauser isn't hitting that three, what is he doing out there on the floor? Because his defense is a little lackluster at times. He's been better, of course, since the beginning portion of his career, but he's still somebody that guys just continuously get buckets against. After Hauser, you're looking at guys like Jordan Walsh. I mean, Jordan Walsh, he's a great defender, but his offensive game needs a lot of refinement out there, and he's still very, very young. A second-year, second-round pick, NBA champion, of course, but second-year, second-round pick. And now you bring in Torrey Craig, that fills a legitimate need for the Boston Celtics roster and really balances out the bench and the roster for the Celtics in its entirety, because you have your big man rotation set, you have your guard rotation set, and now all of your wings and your forwards. Torrey Craig adds to that at the back end, and it really does add a lot to the Boston Celtics roster in terms of him being able to hit that 3-point shot, him being able to defend, can really be a versatile player that gives the Celtics multiple looks. And Franco, I believe you said it, where if you want to go more offense, you go with Hauser, but if you want to go more defense, you go Torrey Craig. But I do wonder if Torrey Craig does pick up some of Sam Hauser's minutes, because he can be a two-way player for the Celtics. I don't think he's going to handle the ball or anything like that on the offensive end of the floor, but he's certainly somebody that can go out there, hit a corner three, hit a wing three, just be somebody that if Jason Tatum, he kicks the ball out to Torrey Craig, he's going to be a near 40% three-point shooter. So great addition by the Boston Celtics getting Torrey Craig essentially for nothing. You could say we traded Jaden Springer indirectly for Torrey Craig, and I think that would be a win at the end of the day for the Boston Celtics.
Anytime you can, and Rob alludes to this a lot, anytime you can add without subtracting, it's a good thing. It is a good thing. And with all due respect to Jaden Springer, obviously a part of that 18th championship team last year, and with all due respect, in his minutes with the Celtics, he 100% played his heart out. He was terrific. So there's no knock on him. But Torrey Craig already fills, as you said, Seamus, already fills a huge void for the Celtics team. And yes, despite the last, 6 to 8 weeks, the Celtics have struggled. There aren't many voids with this team on paper. So adding Torrey Craig to this already stacked Celtics team is terrific. It's a really, really good signing on Brad Stevens. I mean, he really hasn't made such a regression move on this team yet. There hasn't been a move where I'm sitting there and like, Brad, what are you doing? Dating back to obviously that 2021 season when he took over, or that 2022 season when he took over. So, credit to Brad bringing in Torrey Craig, and this was something that we talked about earlier in the afternoon. Obviously, it would have been beautiful to reunite with Daniel Tice, and he'd already be a center that could already work his way back into the rotation over a guy like Nemi or Xavier Tillman. So, obviously the opportunity was there for Daniel Tice to come back for his third stint with the Celtics team, where he already had the winning culture. He already had the camaraderie with a lot of guys on this roster, on this team. So that would have been a solid fit. But I think Torrey Craig, filled a significant gap. And, you just can't, and this is no disrespect to guys like Drew Peterson and Jordan Walsh and Baylor Shireman. They're just too young in their career and inexperienced for you, and also inconsistent for you to rely on when it comes down late in the regular season, even if you have to throw him in there in the playoffs. This is Torrey Craig. He has plenty of playoff experience, plenty of NBA Finals experience, and some terrific teams alongside some terrific players. So this is a guy you also got coming in, not only could be a 3-and-D wing for you and fill that void, but he also has that championship veteran experience that you missed. And, I think it's a terrific signing. I think it's a guy that who could still, give you, real, actual, consistent NBA rotational minutes compared to if you were to bring in, a veteran like Reggie Jackson, if DeAndre Jordan got bought out, or even if, Chris Paul got bought out now with the addition of De'Aaron Fox, which I don't think will happen, but, it's just a name that's out there. So I think it's great that Boston went out and they got an active guy who can provide a somewhat legitimate role in this team. This isn't a guy who will bounce between Maine and Boston. This isn't a guy who is going to rack up the DNPs, in my opinion. This is a guy who can seriously contribute to this roster right now. And there's nights tonight where the Celtics had zero, especially on their perimeter, zero defensive resistance tonight. And this is guy Torrey Craig coming in, who gives you size, can give you that athleticism, and can guard their yard and hold their own. So really good signing for the Boston Celtics and Brad Stevens. And again, this isn't a league shattering, move, but at the same time, this is more of a better move than the Celtics could have made with the guys in the buyout market. I mean, again, as I mentioned earlier, the Celtics are very, very, very restricted. Obviously, they freed up about $15 million with the Springer trade, but only alluding to about 12.8 at most they could have given out. I don't think they could have convinced Lonnie Walker to come back from overseas. Lonnie Walker, has been playing very well overseas. He seems to really enjoy playing overseas right now, and still a young player with a lot that he can provide in both the NBA and overseas play. But, I think the opportunity for Lonnie Walker was there in October. And if we weren't going to attack that opportunity then, I don't know if we were going to attack that opportunity any differently right now. This is a team where they had the chance to get rid of Jaden Springer in the summer. They had the chance to clear that space and sign Lonnie Walker, and they didn't. And that's not a knock on Lonnie Walker, but that's just the reality of what happened. So Torrey Craig is a terrific signing, midseason signing for the Celtics team. And I hope he plays. I hope he plays on Saturday, because here's the thing. Torrey Craig, I don't know if he's going to make this immediate impact and he's going to have this camaraderie with the guys. I would love him to come in. And remember Derek White's first game in Boston against the Denver Nuggets, where you could tell it was his first game. He wasn't playing bad, but you could tell he wasn't up with the plays and he wasn't up with the players. And, you knew it was a new situation for him. I can only hope that Torrey Craig comes into Boston and has a similar start like Derek White, where he just vibes wise, he just fits in with this team and he gels well with this team. And obviously New York added a tremendous amount of wing depth in the offseason, adding Mikal Bridges as well as OG Anunoby. Again, before I got to dip out here, fellas, but before, I leave, this is a great signing for both Torrey Craig and the Boston Celtics. And I don't know if there's a guy you could have gone better. Would have there been a different route that you would have gone? Because obviously, Lonnie Walker is always in the question, but Lonnie seems comfortable overseas. I don't know if that was on the table as much as everybody was talking about. What was that, Franco?
15th slot. Who knows? Lonnie Walker still on.
Yeah, there's still another roster spot out there. We got Lonnie Walker on the minimum, Daniel Tice, Marcus Smart, Josh Richardson.
But as
Bring
far
on
as
the reunions, folks. Bring on the reunions.
But in all seriousness, guys, Seamus, I know you're playing point guard right now, but let me play let me play the big point guard right now. I could be the big who I could facilitate. Let me ask you guys, was there a better, you just,
You
there's
said big
no
point
way
guard.
you
I
can
mean,
tell
I'm
me.
just saying. That was probably the honestly the worst. Yeah, it's probably the worst insult of all time. Gotta get something to throw. Wait,
Um,
going this way.
was there would you have maybe signed anybody differently at this position? Who are some names that maybe were on your list, whether it was to over Torrey Craig or not, for the Celtics to pursue in the buyout market? Seamus, I'll ask you first.
Well, the list, of course, has to still kind of develop as it comes out when players actually go and they're bought out by either bad teams or teams they were just traded to. But for me, I think Torrey Craig is a nice signing by the Boston Celtics. Now, outside of him, you're looking at guys like potentially Kyle Anderson. You could look at a guy like Josh Richardson, potentially. I'm not kidding. Marcus Smart, Josh Richardson, Daniel Tice. You could have looked at all of those players, really, if you wanted to, for the Boston Celtics, because they're likely coming here on minimum deals. Outside of them, yeah, PJ Tucker, that to me doesn't seem realistic because I think if he really had something left in the tank, he would have been playing with the Clippers, and he wasn't playing with the Los Angeles Clippers whatsoever. He was on the injury report every single night in LA. But I'm going to bring up another Celtic too. You have Dennis Schroeder out there. I really don't see Dennis Schroeder being a fit with the Boston Celtics whatsoever at this point in time. But it just seems like all the old Celtics, they're being bought out or they're being traded somewhere on this given day. And I do believe some of the reunifications make more sense than others. I think the Tice one would make more sense, but that to me would only have made more sense if you traded Tillman at the deadline, and
Right.
that's not what the Celtics did at the end of the day. But it would have been somebody like Kyle Anderson or Josh Richardson. I think that would have made a lot more sense. Just kind of going through it here. Yeah, I mean, honestly, Torrey Craig was that one player you're probably looking at and going, that's our guy, because elsewhere, I just there aren't too many names that really fill as much of the need that Torrey Craig fills. I'm looking at the names right now, and yeah, I mean, really, you're looking at Kyle Anderson, but to me, Kyle Anderson is that player who, for me personally, um, he doesn't shoot the three ball. He does not shoot the three ball. I mean, he has a better percentage this year than he has in the past, but he's not a reliable 3-point shooter whatsoever. He's more of a culture guy. He's more of a defensive presence for any team. I think the Timberwolves might like to have Kyle Anderson back at this point in time. But that would be the other name I would be looking at. Other than that, maybe Kelly Olynyk if he's bought out by the Pelicans. You could say Kelly Olynyk, kind of that versatile forward slash big.
No, he went in that trade. I didn't know he went in that trade. He went
Yeah.
in the New Orleans trade, huh?
Well, the Pelicans need bigs because the only one they have is Missy right now. So
Oh yeah, I mean,
Tyson
and
Olynyk.
they got rid of Tice too. I mean, they really have no bigs. I'm still looking at some of the names here. Yeah, I'm outside of. We'll still have to see what the buyout market does look like, because I will say out there it is still developing. I was kind of just looking at more of the trade names today, which there are players who are on contracts with teams at this moment in time that will actually be bought out without being traded. Maybe Reggie Jackson's another one of those names that just traded to the Wizards today, but a lot of these names wouldn't make a ton of sense on the Boston Celtics. Like I said, I mean, to me, the fit here is a forward who can defend and shoot the ball. I mean, you want that around the league. Not saying Torrey Craig is the best player around the NBA, but he certainly fills a legitimate need for the Boston Celtics. Whereas all these other players out there, they don't really fill an entire need. Like if you brought in somebody like Dennis Schroeder, it wouldn't fill a need for the Boston Celtics. If you brought in Daniel Tice, doesn't really fill a need for the Boston Celtics. Even Marcus Smart, I talked about him. I wasn't really joking earlier. I think Marcus Smart, maybe that's Canada. Who knows? Heart and soul, just saying. Here for 9 years. I don't know how he would feel about coming back to Boston. I'm sure he spent his best years of his career in Boston, but
mean,
he
we
still
can't.
wouldn't
It's too
really fill a
expensive.
role either.
It's too expensive. I don't think the opportunity's even there. He's making well over 12.8 million.
Oh, right. I forgot about the rules.
So Smart,
My goodness.
So for
My
the people,
goodness. We talked about this earlier. Got to know the rules on here. Got to know the rules.
Well, it's crazy because my DMs have gotten flooded all day with people.
Dennis Schroeder would be off the table too, by the way.
People trying, he's making 84 million. Oh no, he's not. Sorry. He's DMs have been flooded all day. Justin, can we get this player, this player, this player? You don't understand with the Celtics and the second tax and the apron and all that. Celtics literally could not go over the $12.8 million. That was like the minimum. So guys like Ben Simmons, if he were to get bought out, Marcus Smart, Chris Middleton, if he were to get bought out, there's
I think
there's
Kelly Olynyk too. I think he would have been over that as well.
There's
Not
Kelly
mistaken.
Olynyk. There's a lot of players who would fit pretty well with the Celtics team, but unfortunately, they're making too much money right now for the Celtics require the buyout market. So automatically, guys like Middleton and Marcus Smart, those guys are off the table, and Ben Simmons for the Celtics. There was some talk about Ben Simmons coming to Boston via trade. Essentially, that just wouldn't make any sense. You'd have to trade a guy like Drew Holiday, Jaylen Brown. I mean, let's face it. If you didn't trade Jaylen Brown to the Nets for Kevin Durant, you're sure as hell not going to trade Jaylen Brown to the Nets for Ben Simmons. But obviously, we wouldn't do that. But talking about the salary cap and the second tax apron, you would have to dish out a similar salary to a guy in the starting lineup for the Celtics. And there's not a single guy, even in the top 6, I'd give for Ben Simmons. There's certain guys out there where it makes sense if the Celtics had the money to do so and the flexibility. They just don't, and that's how it works out. But for the Boston Celtics to go out and get a guy like Torrey Craig for the minimum, and that's huge for the Celtics team. I got to dip out, fellas. I hate to cut it short, but there's a ton of trades left to a ton of trades left for you guys to go over, so I'll let you guys get to that. But abysmal performance tonight for the Celtics. Embarrassing that can't happen on their home court. But I'm very relieved to see the Celtics very active in the buyout market and go after filling a void, a 3-and-D wing who can play consistent minutes for this team. Hopefully we see him on Saturday night because he is probable to play. So for now, fellas, Seamus, control Franco while I'm gone, please. I know he's tough. But continue the show. Part two of the trade deadline special.
Sure.
Right.
See you, fellas.
Get the balloons.
See you, Franco.
Balloons.
See you, buddy.
Part 2. All right. See you, Justin.
Good
All
to
right.
see
And
you every time.
look, nice little CTW logo there on the side. But let's get this layout correct. Because, Franco,
right,
we
yep.
still have quite a few trades to go through here. And the next one I actually want to get to is one that we see earlier today when we were on the special. A big theme of the special was, we're on this topic. And then, boom, we're over here on this topic because this move happened across the league. And that was really the theme of the day. It was like, we're on Jimmy Butler. Now we're on DeAndre Hunter. And then, all of a sudden, the Clippers and Hawks are making moves. But this next trade I want to talk about is, of course, surrounding one of the bigger moves at the deadline. Now, not in terms of a big needle moving move in terms of I don't really know what this is going to do for either of the squads involved in this, but Brandon Ingram, his time in New Orleans is officially over. Brandon Ingram traded to the Toronto Raptors from the New Orleans Pelicans. Of course, Brandon Ingram wanted that max contract extension from the New Orleans Pelicans. He'll be a free agent this summer. We'll have to see what that number comes in at for Brandon Ingram over the summer. I don't think he's going to get that max extension, but maybe he gets a little bit more money with the Toronto Raptors, who are going to have some money to give out over the summer. But the Toronto Raptors, the big conversation was with this particular trade. The Raptors, they're in the summer, they're wanting to acquire players via free agency, yet they're not a huge free agency destination because they're, of course, out of the country in Canada. It's very cold there during the winter in Toronto, and players, I mean, if you have the choice between Los Angeles weather and Toronto weather when you're playing a whole season from October to April, players they're not always down with going up to Canada, and we've heard that many times in the past. So the Raptors, they go out and get themselves a pseudo all-star player, Brandon Ingram. We know he can be up to that level, but we know he doesn't have all the intangibles of a real elite all-star. More so the passing ability and some of the defense is spotty at times, but certainly a bucket getter when he was with the New Orleans Pelicans, even beforehand when he was a young player with the Los Angeles Lakers, of course, coming over to the New Orleans Pelicans in that deal for Anthony Davis. But the New Orleans Pelicans, they receive Bruce Brown, Kelly Olynyk, and I believe a pick back for Brandon Ingram in this deal. But Brandon Ingram, he's heading to Toronto, and the Toronto Raptors, on their end, it makes sense why they're trying to land a star, but I don't necessarily see the fit between Brandon Ingram, Scotty Barnes, the rest of the roster. And this is another deadline where the Raptors, they kind of sell off a little bit. They sell a little bit, but then they also add. It feels like we're in the exact same spot. I don't know if you remember, Franco, from a year ago. We were on the trade deadline special and we were talking about the Raptors. What are they doing? They went out and they sold Dennis Schroeder. They were like, okay, Dennis Schroeder, you're gone. But then they went and acquired Kelly Olynyk, who they kicked the can. We talked about that last year. Oh, they're probably going to trade Kelly Olynyk later on in the future. Well, that day in the future was today when they traded Kelly Olynyk and Bruce Brown to the New Orleans Pelicans. Bruce Brown was another player they acquired last year for Pascal Siakam, and this is what they get for those two players is Brandon Ingram going from New Orleans to Toronto. So what do you think about this move, Franco?
I think this is a very smart move for the Raptors. I'm gonna think positively about it because they had a position of need, which was filling in the wings, and they also had a lot of players as they're kind of like the Washington Wizards and the Toronto Raptors have been kind of like a dark a garbage dump spot for teams during the NBA trade deadlines, and I feel like they're usually left with the shorter end of the stick of a player that is making a lot of money for the production that they are offering. So I think they're really just like for example, Chris Middleton over on the Washington Wizards alongside Malcolm Brogdon and Marcus Smart. Those players just didn't really have another location to go to, so they say might as well drop them off in Toronto or with Washington. And I think that this kind of changes that outlook for the Toronto Raptors. This is kind of the first time their depth chart has kind of formulated into something that looks like a cohesive group. Adding Brandon Ingram as another scoring wing that you can play alongside him, Grady Dick or R.J. Barrett and Emmanuel Quickly. So they have a good amount of scoring talent with a couple of years of potential left, and Jakob Pertl's done a solid job at center. So I think you can kind of see a vision starting to formulate in Toronto. And I think the New Orleans Pelicans are a team that really have just been struck by the injury bug and have been plagued with injuries throughout the season. And they get two players that are very great, good rotational players. I think Kelly Olynyk will be able to contribute for them immediately with the lack of size that they have at big man in New Orleans. They really went into the season with Yves Missy and Daniel Tice as the only centers and Carlo Maktovic, I believe his name is. And I think that was necessary for them to add alongside Bruce Brown, who is a very talented and versatile player who can play from the 1 to 3 for you and will be able to fill in for CJ McCollum or Trey Murphy if they're out with an injury. So I think both sides really won that trade.
Yeah, and we look at here, I mean, from the other side of this trade, the New Orleans Pelicans, they of course receive Bruce Brown and Kelly Olynyk from the Raptors, and the New Orleans Pelicans, their direction right now is a little up in the air from the standpoint of, well, you don't you have 12 wins in 50 games. That's where that's where the New Orleans Pelicans are at this point in time, and essentially the New Orleans Pelicans, they're in a little bit of a spot of limbo because they have a competitive roster. All right, they have a competitive roster out there, but the fact of the matter is the roster is just not competitive in record. It's an injured roster perpetually. This season, of course, has been just a struggle for them to stay healthy in its entirety. And ultimately, if you're the New Orleans Pelicans, you're acquiring assets in this deal that you actually feel comfortable with acquiring Brandon Ingram. And let's actually spell acquired correctly, folks. It was not spelled correctly on the last graphic. I was just looking at it going, nope, acquire is not spelled correct. So a little bit of a typo there, but we got that all squared away. But the New Orleans Pelicans and the Toronto Raptors in this deal, I like this deal a little more for the New Orleans Pelicans from the assets in which they received for Brandon Ingram, because I really wasn't thinking Brandon Ingram was going to net what he did on the trade market this particular deadline. It almost felt like the Raptors, maybe, just maybe, they were bidding against nobody for Brandon Ingram. I'm not really sure. This is the thing about this trade as well for the Raptors and Brandon Ingram. The Raptors wanted to sign somebody this summer, which I question at the Raptors. I don't know why they have not looked at potentially bottoming out. Now they're doing that while also acquiring talent at the same time. I will say they're down in the standings, but the Raptors, they wanted to sign a player this summer. Could have been Brandon Ingram on the market. Brandon Ingram is going to demand somewhat of a good salary over the summer. It's not going to be a max contract or anything like that. But I wonder if the Raptors in this situation, if they're going to actually be able to re-sign Brandon Ingram, and if he's going to want to stay there. It could end up a situation where they're the only team offering him the money he wants, which could, of course, force Brandon Ingram to go and sign in Toronto. But the Raptors, they kind of get an in-house talent. They go, okay, we're going to have him here for half of the season, and then we want to sign him later on in time. But this is where I kind of believe the Raptors are running a huge risk in this deal, because if you give up, if you give up Bruce Brown and Kelly Olynyk, the Pelicans, they get a nice return for Brandon Ingram, who they're going to lose in the summer anyway if they weren't going to pay him. I mean, really. And the Raptors, they go, well, Bruce Brown, see ya. Kelly Olynyk, see ya. And those actually might be two expiring players. So the Pelicans could lose them in the summer theoretically as well. But I look at it from a Raptors perspective and go, well, Bruce Brown and Kelly Olynyk, I'm not saying they were better than Brandon Ingram to have necessarily. I love having Bruce Brown on the team because we saw how much he affected the Denver Nuggets in their playoff run, and he can really be a player off the bench or even a starter for a team out there that can really impact a championship run. But Brandon Ingram, it's a little bit of an odd fit in Toronto. They're definitely taking some risk. Now they are, I will say, they are trading away expiring deals. Now let me actually make sure that's true, because can't just give out false narratives here on the. Yes. So Bruce Brown, he is on an expiring contract right now, if I'm not mistaken. His deal ends after this season. So Bruce Brown, his deal ends after this season. So this is almost a swap of expirings, and maybe the teams want to go and sign, re-sign these players later on in time. But I will say the Toronto Raptors, it's like they're a little ahead of themselves at this point in time. They are, because the Raptors, I think, is it better to go young? Is it better to really wait out, of course, a potential, I would say, rebuild? So Kelly Olynyk actually has one more year left on his deal. So the Pelicans, from the standpoint of this from this deal, the Pelicans do have some future money. They push out into the future with Kelly Olynyk that they could move as an expiring at next year's deadline or even over the offseason. You never know. So that's part of the deal for the New Orleans Pelicans. Also get a first-round pick in this deal. But I will say the Raptors and the Pelicans, this was almost a deal of swapping expirings of Bruce Brown and Brandon Ingram. But I look at it from a Raptors perspective and go, at what point are they going to actually start building in-house with their roster and go one direction or the other? Now, it feels like they've been trying. And see, this is where I don't know what they're trying to do exactly. Are they trying to win? Are they trying to lose right now? That's kind of been the conversation with the Raptors the last two seasons. I understand they're trying to receive talent, but to me, the talent is almost like this very knee jerky type of acquirement of this talent because Brandon Ingram, you see the Celtics, they were methodical over time. They drafted Brown and Tatum. The team around them at the time was very good, but then the Celtics, they had to retool and rebuild around Brown and Tatum at a certain point in time, and that led to the monster squad we had today with all these players, Holiday, White, Porzingis, acquiring all them around Brown and Tatum to really mesh and make that perfect roster. Well, this move by the Toronto Raptors, I don't see this as I don't really see the Raptors meshing with Brandon Ingram at this point in time. Maybe they go and build around Ingram and Scotty Barnes, but those two players in themselves, I don't really see them meshing entirely. I don't see Scotty Barnes as a player too that I don't want to say deserves necessarily, but I don't see him playing up to the standard of what money he makes at this point in time. And it is certainly an interesting deal from both the Pelicans and Raptors perspective, because I think the Pelicans, they got a nice return from Brandon Ingram for sure, but the Raptors, I'm a little skeptical on how this sets them up for the future and where this ascends them to. They could be better next year and they could be better with Brandon Ingram, but is this going to make you a contender one day? Is this the Kawhi trade that just puts you over the top? Of course, the Raptors were already built at that point, but does this make the Raptors at any point in time a championship contender later on down the road in the next 3 to 5 seasons? I don't really see that with Brandon Ingram, although you never know. Masai Ujiri, he's built one championship roster in time, but ever since then, he's been a little bit questionable. I would also ask this: would you rather have Pascal Siakam or Brandon Ingram at this point in time?
I would have to go Pascal Siakam, and
See, and that's why it's like, why would they even trade Pascal Siakam? Because they essentially traded him for Bruce Brown, and they got Kelly Olynyk along with in the trade deadline last year. They traded Pascal Siakam at last year's deadline, but then they go and flip his assets essentially, in which they acquired for him for Brandon Ingram. So it's a little odd, I will say, from the Toronto Raptors perspective, but I don't know if you want to add more on that or not there.
I think it's just almost. I can summarize it as making do with what they have. They have been pretty misfortunate with their draft lottery selections. I don't think they've really had a top. If my memory might be failing me, but I can't recall a time that the Toronto Raptors had within a top 3 pick in the draft, and I think that's something that lottery balls just won't fall their way. But the I said in the trade deadline episode before, I think that the Eastern Conference is pretty open this season for a play-in opportunity. I think that you're looking at around the final 7 to 12 seeds in the Eastern Conference. There's not really any ones that are separating themselves. So the Toronto Raptors are still, as poor as they've been playing this season with only 16 wins, they're still in a weird opportunity to possibly make a run at a play-in appearance. So I think you can see them start to win on a little bit more frequent of a basis, but I think it appeases their fans and kind of lies a vision of what this team can become, and it does add some core pieces around your foundation of Grady Dick and Scotty Barnes, which are your 2 younger, more promising players on your roster. So I think moving forward, we'll see more of um, more more mediocre play from the Toronto Raptors. I think it puts them in a level around the Chicago Bulls, and I I mean above. Actually, I would consider the Charlotte Hornets to be working their way up there, but they're slowly working their way up, and I think it just is going to take 1 or 2 good moves to really put those teams into the running for a 7 or 8 seed.
Well, yeah, we're gonna kind of spur this Raptors point to another team real quick because the Raptors, they also made another move at the deadline, going and trading Davion Mitchell to the Miami Heat, who of course acquired Andrew Wiggins and Davion Mitchell, along with a lot of other assets in that Jimmy Butler deal at the trade deadline. But this is also where I'm kind of looking at the Raptors with a little bit of a side eye. They go and trade Davion Mitchell for PJ Tucker. And for me, I go, well, what was the point of that? Why are we trading Davion Mitchell, who's still a young, hard-nosed defender in the league? I would still consider a slightly developing player, although you're probably looking at him at this point in time in 2025 as a less promising player than he was coming into the NBA as a lottery pick to the Sacramento Kings. But now the Toronto Raptors move him to the Miami Heat, and I don't have any doubt that the Miami Heat, the way we joke about Heat culture, but it is somewhat of a real thing down there in Miami that they play hard, they have hard practices. Davion Mitchell was that kind of player coming into the league, and ultimately the Toronto Raptors get rid of Davion Mitchell and trade him to the Miami Heat for PJ Tucker, who we all thought, oh, PJ Tucker reunification for the Heat, but we all saw if he's not producing in LA with the Clippers on a contending roster, which you could argue, oh, the Clippers, they're not necessarily contenders, but they are up in the standings right now. They're in that 5-6 slot in the West. And if he's not contributing with the Clippers, I would think, well, he's not going to really contribute anywhere else. And PJ Tucker, he's that Al Horford age. And I really don't think where PJ Tucker was at a certain point in his career, what his strengths were. I don't really see PJ Tucker being able to do that again because we all saw the on-ball defense, the hound dog defense, the rebounding for PJ Tucker. He was somebody that started for the Milwaukee Bucks back during their championship run, or rather, he was coming off the bench or he was starting, and but he was playing major minutes regardless in that championship run for the Milwaukee Bucks. He signed with the Heat the next season, made a run with them to the Eastern Conference Finals. We met them in the East finals that year. But PJ Tucker, he was somebody that would consistently put up 0 points, but then you look, oh, he'd have 10 rebounds. And he was just rebounding all over the place. He was getting every single board, playing hard, and just playing that really hard-nosed, physical on-ball defense. We saw with the Houston Rockets a long time ago. There's one game that really comes to mind in 2018-19 when PJ Tucker was just hounding every single Celtics ball handler at the Garden, and he affected the game to the point where the Celtics could not overcome the Rockets that season at the Garden. But PJ Tucker, I think he's done with that in his career because of how old he is now. And we'll see. Maybe he proves me wrong. Maybe he ends up somewhere. Who knows? PJ Tucker, this might be actually traded to Toronto, and Toronto's probably going to get rid of him now, which he actually goes. He goes from a team, he reunites with the Heat, who he's with, but then people forget he was also with the Raptors before the Houston Rockets a long time ago, and he was, of course, with the Phoenix Suns as well. But I kind of see PJ Tucker as somebody who could have played his last NBA minutes and he might have already he might be done in the NBA at this point in time. He's been traded all over the place right now. Might be done. Might be the last kind of hoorah from PJ Tucker, and it's not on court. It's in the tweets, of course, with all of the notifications coming through. But the Heat, they get Davion Mitchell, and I think the reason the Raptors go out and trade Davion Mitchell is, number one, they're getting a pick for him. So that's something. That is something because Davion Mitchell is on an expiring deal, and Davion Mitchell's money, we'll have to see what he actually nets this summer. I think the Heat will actually be able to get him on a fairly team-friendly contract because he's not really produced a ton in this league as a young player on his rookie deal. And I think the Heat, I think they look at Davion Mitchell and go, this is a guy who plays really physical defense, not the tallest player, not the most athletic, lengthy player, but he's somebody who really plays hard, plays physical, really fits in with that Heat culture narrative. And I do believe that he could potentially be somebody that contributes for the Miami Heat later on in time. And I think they're going to get him on a fairly team-friendly contract going into the future. But PJ Tucker and a pick goes out to Toronto. Toronto really just taking on, they're swapping money in that deal, but then they get an extra pick for Davion Mitchell, who they're likely losing in the summer anyway.
Yeah, I think that Davion Mitchell is a really good fill-in for Terry Rozier, as he's dealing with off the court battles. I think he's definitely a player that will help
One way to put it.
keep the Miami Heat afloat. And knowing Pat Riley and the Miami Heat, the Heat culture, as you said, they're not going to be a team that's really going to go for a tanking route. I think they're going to maintain a consistent battle for a play-in slot and opportunity, and really try to prove themselves as contenders going forward and into their next search for a superstar, which will probably begin next off season when the free agents roll out. And haven't gotten myself too familiar with that alignment of who's going to be hitting the market for them, but I'm sure they're going to be throwing whatever cash load they can to bring that big name appeal back to Miami. But during this lull, you're going to see a lot of players be able to step up, and I think you're going to see more highlighted performances out of Bam Adebayo being the primary player and Tyler Hero being the primary scorers and rebounder for this team in Miami. So, and I think Andrew Wiggins isn't too much of a downgrade from the production you were getting from Jimmy Butler. You are losing that mentality and what Jimmy Butler brings to a team, which is a contending mentality of an attitude. So I think the Warriors really gained a lot of momentum in that sense, and giving Curry that third star. We've seen the Warriors playing a lot of mix and match when it comes to the trying to get Curry back to success and who can we match Curry up with now that Clay is gone and we've had to move forward from our younger players, which I think will probably bite the Warriors in the ass in the next couple of years, as they had so many developmental pieces on their roster, like Andrew Wiggins and Jordan Poole, and just to name a few in there. It's still probably going to make more moves as he nears the corner of turning down the lane of retirement, which I'm sure he's going to do a farewell tour, likewise with LeBron and Kevin Durant. So that I think we'll see a good continuation, and also Jimmy Butler. You said it earlier. Jimmy Butler really won the situation. He wanted to move on to a situation other than Miami that isn't just surviving to be in the seventh or eighth seed and not going to add the talent around him or make the move to create a contending team in Miami, which I feel for Jimmy in that situation, because there were opportunities for him to get Damian Lillard, and you see Damian Lillard is now in Milwaukee. You could just go down the list of, or go on any Heat fan page. You can probably find a Photoshop of any NBA star in a Miami jersey standing next to Jimmy Butler, because they were just always saying, who's going to complete that big three in Miami so Jimmy Butler can have a chance to really win a championship? That never happened, so now his chances with the Golden State Warriors, and now that leaves the Miami Heat a middle of the pack team and fighting for either the 9th or 10th slot in this year's play-in tournament.
Yeah, the Miami Heat roster right now just screams out play-in team and screams out 8, 9, 10 seed, because all the players, they don't really, I shouldn't say they don't have a star. They do have Tyler Hero, who was an all-star this year. They do have Bam Adebayo, who's been an all-star in the past. But those are your kind of B-tier all-stars per se. You have kind of the A-listers out there, the Giannis's, the LeBrons, the Jokic's, the Tatums of the world. But then you have kind of the B-listers or even C-listers out there, where Yeah, they're all stars, but they're not going to make the all-star team every season. They're not exactly bringing a whole new level to a team. They're certainly good players, but they're not necessarily these huge ceiling-raising players. And that's Tyler Hero and Bam Adebayo. And if those are your two all-stars, you're kind of in the middle of the pack. Kind of sounds like a team like the Chicago Bulls, where oh yeah, you have Zach LaVine, an all-star. Oh, you have Nikola Vucevic, an all-star. Of course, that pairing was just broken up at the deadline. We'll talk about that in a second, but it kind of sounds like that, where it's like, okay, you have some all stars, but you're not at the top of the league in terms of having, top 10 NBA players or top 15 NBA players. But the Heat in this deal, I actually think they got an okay return for Jimmy Butler, because a lot of people are sitting there saying, well, first of all, the Warriors definitely won the deal. Jimmy Butler won the day because Jimmy Butler got that extension, $121 million for 2 years on top of his potential player option next year. So Jimmy Butler won the trade by going to a team in which he wanted to be traded to, and then he also got the money in which he wanted. Now he did want the max extension, got half of it really, but when you can get half of what you originally thought maybe you weren't going to get any of, that's still a really good payday for Jimmy Butler. I'm sure he's completely fine. I will say those California taxes will be a little harsher on him than those Florida taxes later on down the line. But Jimmy Butler still wins in this deal because he's going to play with Steph and Draymond out in Golden State. He's still getting his payday. But I still think the Miami Heat came out all right from this deal, because now I will say, if they did this a lot earlier, they would have netted a much better return. They just would have, because you look at it in time, the Miami Heat over the summer, they were taking offers for Jimmy Butler. We were talking, we weren't talking over the summer, but others were talking over the summer going, oh, could Amin Thompson be in a deal? Could you put Cam Whitmore, Tari Eason, maybe from the Houston Rockets? And the Rockets were going, oh, no, we're all right. But that was a legitimate conversation. Like, what type of young player would the Heat get in return for Jimmy Butler? What kind of picks? And it all whittled down to Andrew Wiggins at the end of the day, and Dennis Schroeder and Kyle Anderson, who were rerouted elsewhere. And Kyle Anderson probably waiting for a buyout situation. But we all know Dennis Schroeder, who we're going to talk about in a second as well. He was rerouted to another team out there. And the Heat, they also get a pick back, a protected pick from Golden State, that we'll see how that conveys out in the future. If it's a top 10 protected pick this year, I believe it might be protected next year. And then after that, it's going to be unprotected if it still doesn't convey to the Miami Heat. So it's not a great return for Jimmy Butler whatsoever if you really look at it, because really you only received Andrew Wiggins and a protected pick from the Warriors, who are expecting to be maybe in the middle of the pack. Like, oh, you might receive a lottery pick, you might be a little bit above the lottery, not a great pick. But I still think the Miami Heat returned. I think that in return they got an all right package for what the situation was now. If you look at it in the full scope, right, the full sample size of the Miami Heat and Jimmy Butler, they lost because they could have traded Jimmy Butler more at either the beginning of the season or even last summer or even last season, if you really want to go back that far. And right now, what the Heat received for Jimmy Butler is not anything near what some of the offers were looking like over last summer and in 2024. But I still think where it was right now, where the situation was, the Miami Heat were at a desperate point with Jimmy Butler. They just were. I mean, they were going, we just want this man off the roster. We don't really, I would almost say they almost don't care who they received in return. And out there, I think a lot of teams they looked at Jimmy Butler, they went, oh, he's 35 years old. He's kind of injury prone. He can be kind of a headache in the locker room at times if he, of course, wants to be moved or isn't happy with the situation. And it just didn't make a bunch of sense that, oh, a team was going to go out and trade a young player in picks for Jimmy Butler. And we didn't really see that whatsoever. The Heat didn't receive a young player in picks, but they did receive Andrew Wiggins from the Golden State Warriors, who the Golden State Warriors, they were looking to make a legitimate move at the deadline. Their team is dead in the water right now. They had a great start to the season, but their team is dead in the water. Andrew Wiggins, we've seen his moments of brilliance, particularly, of course, 3 years ago in the 2022 NBA Finals, unfortunately, really shutting down Jason Tatum. His offensive rebounding was just spectacular alongside Kevon Looney in that series. We'll see if Andrew Wiggins can ever come up with that same spark again. He's shown flashes, but he's been inconsistent for the Golden State Warriors. And the Warriors, they really wanted to they wanted to make a move and they wanted to make a splash because they have a short window with Steph and Draymond, and they were the most desperate team out there to go and actually move a real asset for Jimmy Butler, which would be Andrew Wiggins. Every other team out there, they were probably looking at, oh, here's your contract filler. We're not giving you any picks in return, yada yada. Well, the Warriors did give up a first round pick for Jimmy Butler and Andrew Wiggins, and I think that's a little bit better than what some of the other teams were actually offering at this point in time. And no deal included young players and multiple picks for Jimmy Butler because of the situation in which was forming. But Andrew Wiggins, I would say that's an all right grab for the Miami Heat. I think it screams out 8 seed 100% because even Andrew Wiggins, remember, he was an all-star starter a couple of years ago. That's one of the all-star games we look back at and go, how exactly did that transpire? Andrew Wiggins, an all-star starter. But you have kind of three B-listers in terms of the All-Stars and Andrew Wiggins, Bam Adebayo, Tyler Hero. But at the end of the day, the Miami Heat, they still have all of those players to actually go out and make deals with later on in time. It's not as if they're going to be, trading for a star anytime soon, but those could be three players. You never know. It's what people are talking about right now with the Miami Heat is in 2026. They're trying to set themselves up for the summer of 2026. I know some Heat fans don't want to hear this because it's always been. I've heard a couple of Heat podcasts go. We've always been setting up for a star. Damian Lillard, Bradley Beal. Can we get anybody here? You were just talking about how all these stars were next to Jimmy Butler and all these photoshops, and really the Heat are doing that again. They're hoping, in 2026 we're going to land a free agent. Giannis, whoever, Luka Dončić could be a free agent. Just throwing that out there. You never know. The Miami weather is just as good as the LA weather. I will say a little bit more humid, but just as good. But the Heat with these three players, Hero, Adebayo, Wiggins in particular, that could be a trio there later on in time that you could move for something. One of those players move for something. And then maybe in 2026, if you're going to go out there and sign a free agent with a max cap slot, one of these players actually comes along with or re-signs or is still there at that point in time. And the Miami Heat could have a nice little starting five with Wiggins, Tyler Hero, Bam Adebayo, and then potentially another max contract player. So the Heat, I wouldn't say that this is a total loss for the Miami Heat. I understand why people would look at it that way, but I do think there's a silver lining for the Miami Heat, even though from a Celtics perspective, we certainly know we might be bound to see them in the first round yet again, and we're definitely not scared of the Miami Heat anymore.
No. I think Jimmy Butler was kind of that face and that fear factor for them, but moving forward with them, I think you're looking at teams like Philly, you're looking at teams like Chicago, Atlanta, Miami. They all are within the same realm and category right now, and it seems like it's a box that teams are comfortable with being in because it's better than being at the bottom of the barrel, and it also is can be a huge jump factor for your team if you are able to gain that momentum, find something that connects. There are a lot of question marks alongside those teams, especially the Miami Heat. So it's going to be interesting to see who steps up for the Miami Heat. Yami Yaquez is one of those players who has a lot of potential. You look at Nikola Jovic. They have a lot of back end talent and a lot of uprising talent on their team that hasn't really been able to be fully utilized and brought into that limelight of getting starting minutes and being in the rotation. And that kind of opened up with this trade while being able to gain Andrew Wiggins and Davion Mitchell, who are both two players that are going to help carry this team forward and not allow them to drop to the bottom of the Eastern Conference standing.
Yeah, certainly potentially some addition by subtraction for the Miami Heat, acquiring Andrew Wiggins, getting rid of Jimmy Butler, and kind of ridding themselves of that cloud of stink over the last 2 months where it's just controversy. Oh, Eric Spoelstra in the press conference every single day being asked about Jimmy Butler, and that is all gone now. for the Miami Heat. So maybe going ahead, there's a much different vibe in the locker room in Miami. But a player who could have found himself in the Miami locker room this evening or really this afternoon was a man by the name of Mr. Dennis Schroeder, who was, of course, with the Golden State Warriors. He was routed to the Miami Heat, but then rerouted to the Jazz and then back over to the Pistons. So 4 different teams in one day for Dennis Schroeder, the former Celtic out there. But Dennis Schroeder lands with the Detroit Pistons. We're not going to spend too much time on this. I just want to touch on Dennis Schroeder, the fact of he's kind of that Isaiah Thomas-esque guard right now in the NBA where we look at him and go, okay, he's a good guard. Like, he can play. We know he can play. But what is he? Is he a starter? What type of money are you giving him? Is he a bench guy? How does he fit in? Like, he's almost too good to be a bench guy at times. And when he comes in, the ball handling and playmaking ability, I should say Dennis Schroeder isn't a huge playmaker. He's more of a scoring type of guard. But coming into a game, you kind of wonder, okay, what other guards does he fit well next to? He's a good guard, but he doesn't really fit alongside a lot of other players in the league. That's kind of how Isaiah Thomas was. He was that really good guard to come off the bench and be that good scoring guard, that good scoring presence. Of course, an all-star MVP candidate with the Celtics. But after the Celtics career ended and even before the Celtics career started for Isaiah Thomas, it's kind of a player that didn't really fit anywhere because you couldn't really mesh him in with a lot of lineups. Defensively wasn't all there. Schroeder, a better defensive player than Isaiah Thomas was, of course. But I almost look at Dennis Schroeder right now and go, where's his NBA home? He's good enough to be an NBA player. We know that. He's a good guard. But are the Pistons really going to be that home for Dennis Schroeder going into the future? I'm not so sure.
He'll be back on the buyout market, and I think that's going to be heading into this season. He's a talented enough player to be a six-man for a team. It's whether he finds that location where he can falter in and be able to contribute off the bench and be a scoring option. I think I was surprised when he was first moved from Miami because this was before the Davion Mitchell trade happened, but he was a prime candidate to be able to be that, as they like to say in the NFL, that bridge player, that bridge point guard until you find that answer or find out what's going on with Terry Rozier and be able to find out what your team is going to look like moving forward. He's one of those players that you can really just glue in there and get some results from him. He's a talented enough player that I don't know if he'll be on the Pistons, and who knows, the Pistons could utilize him as that player for the rest of the season as they have made improvements to their team. They were a very dark horse team, and they're looking, who knows, they could find themselves outside or inside the top 6 of the Eastern Conference and be able to avoid the play-in tournament. So they're a team
They're
that
ascending
have,
above that level of mediocrity that you're talking about. The Philadelphia's over Chicago,
yeah,
Miami. It's like, oh, the Pistons. This is because they're young cast. Cade Cunningham, I mean, first time All Star. Jalen Duran there. I mean, you look at all the players. Jaden Ivey, of course, unfortunately hurt, but Pistons. They're. I'm with Justin. Like, I'm in total agreement with Justin. This is Justin's team outside of the Celtics. I mean, he's Pistons rising. He's on Pistons Talk Weekly, of course, but I mean, the Pistons, they're going places. I think they're going to be in that category with the Magic, and well, the New York Knicks are more in their prime, but I think the Magic and the Pistons, looking at those two teams, those are teams the Celtics are really going to have to worry about in the Eastern Conference in the future.
yeah. I mean, and the Pistons did such a good job for the first time, really finding those veteran players who weren't going to find their paydays elsewhere on other teams. You look at a player like Tobias Harris. He was
Tim
not
Hardaway.
going to get a lot of that money, and he's not going to give you the production that was expected out of him for the money he was receiving in Philadelphia. He was a player that can give you 20 points on a given night, but it's more the veteran presence that he can surround himself with. And you also have these guys on shorter term deals, so they're kind of trying to prove themselves to be like, hey, I'm still viable as an option as on a contending team. In that process, they've turned the Pistons into that. You have a lot of young, talented players, Marcus Sasser, Kate Cunningham,
Ron
Ivy,
Holland.
Ron Holland. The list keeps on going, especially their centers as well, Duran and Stewart. They're two talented young players that they really have a really filled 15-man roster that you can't really say any of them don't deserve the opportunities they're getting, and it's kind of just been kind of that accumulated um, talent that they've received after being going through so many rough years and seeing so many trades, seeing so many talented players leave their roster, and just piecing together, getting Simone Fontecchios of the world. It's really just finally came together for them. They got the coach that's really been leading them and is probably a candidate to be coach of the year, um, especially with their performance so far and if it continues moving forward. But I think they're a team that, who knows, maybe the Celtics might see in round two, round one, or round one, even round two would be very insane.
I mean, I wouldn't put it past the Pistons to cause a first round upset. They are the 6th seed right now. They could move up to 5. They could upset a team like Indiana or Milwaukee. I mean, maybe not so much New York or Boston, but certainly Indiana or Milwaukee. I would think the Pistons actually have a legitimate chance against. But the Pistons, they tried to do this last year, I will say. They tried to add veteran talent around their young core, and it just didn't work out because all those veterans, they just didn't really. First of all, they weren't playing consistently. And secondly, those veteran talents were just not real fits on that Pistons roster, didn't really contribute anything whatsoever. This year, I think the Detroit Pistons, they're seeing a lot more of that production out of their veteran cast, the Tim Hardaway Juniors of the world, the Tobias Harrises of the world, and of course now potentially Dennis Schroeder if he doesn't hit the buyout market. But I'm going to look out west now to a team that kind of in the same conversation as the Toronto Raptors is certainly a better team than the Toronto Raptors, but I believe this team really, in terms of defining a direction, not really sure where they're always going, and that would be, of course, the Sacramento Kings, who trade for Zach LaVine and Jonas Valanciunas at the deadline after moving off of De'Aaron Fox. Now, De'Aaron Fox, I mean, he was kind of requesting a trade out of Sacramento. He wasn't necessarily going full force requesting a trade, but he was saying, I'm not really going to resign here. You guys can move me now if you really want to get real assets out of myself. And the Kings, they land Zach LaVine in that deal. They land draft capital for De'Aaron Fox as well. The Chicago Bulls, they land Kevin Herter, they land Zach Collins, Trey Jones, and their own first round pick back, one they traded a long time ago. And I just don't see the return there for Zach LaVine whatsoever. I do like the return for De'Aaron Fox from the Kings. I don't think it puts them in a particular direction, which I'm confused about. But I do like the fact the Kings were able to get Zach LaVine out of the deal and even extracting Jonas Valanciunas away from the Washington Wizards, who were bound to trade Jonas Valanciunas. They trade a couple of second round picks for Jonas Valanciunas, and Valanciunas. People were kind of saying, "Oh, Valanciunas and Sabonis, how is this going to work?" Well, hey, they're both Lithuanian national team members. They're both guys. They played together before in FIBA competition, so that's going to be certainly a chemistry matchup that we're going to have to watch going ahead. But the Kings, in terms of their direction right now, Franco, are you on board with what the Kings have done during this deadline, or are you kind of, I would have liked them you would have liked to see them go one way or the other, either actually going and really competing or not? I mean, I would say competing is kind of hard, but how are you feeling about the direction of the Kings right now?
The Sacramento Bulls. I am feeling like this team is really trying to remain relevant within the Western Conference. They're a team that doesn't seem to have too much of a direction going forward in the future, and trying to make the most of what they have right now. I think moving on from De'Aaron Fox is a huge step for this team, and is a player that they could have relied on moving forward, and could have had some good runs and some potential with it. Obviously, have brought them so far as he has already, and I don't know if that remains the same with the team that they've put together now. Obviously, a talented roster. Zach LaVine fills in as that star player alongside DeMar DeRozan and um, DeMontis Sabonis. You got a larger team and kind of a questionable lineup of where these players all piece together. Obviously, Jonas Valanciunas and DeMontis Sabonis. Sabonis has played the four position before he was traded to Sacramento, and has kind of gained a little bit of size, but I wouldn't rule it out that he can play that position. But in a Western Conference as competitive as it is right now, they're probably looking to be on the outskirts, and where I'm starting to notice a trend that a lot of these teams that were as active as they were in the trade deadline are really playing around in that 7 to 10 seed in the either the East or the West. It's kind of shows how undecided the NBA is looking at this point on who is going to be that uh, top contender. Obviously, the East is a little bit more settled than the West, with New York, Milwaukee, and Boston as those top three. Maybe Milwaukee can meek into that conversation, but it's looking unlikely after the moves that they made. I think they're going to be a stagnated, probably 4 or 5 seed, and then the rest will fall where it may. But in the West, you could see some of these teams that are ranked in the third or fourth seed drop down to the eighth or ninth seed in the West because of how much the teams have changed and how much the narrative has changed on the Western seed. It's very undecided, and a lot of teams are floating around the same area record wise in the West, and some teams are going to see the improvements from this trade deadline and the acquisitions made, and some teams are going to see the lack of chemistry because these are moves that could have been made earlier on in the season. And if you played a full 81 games with a readjusted crew, you would be in a much better position than you are at game 41 of this year.
Yeah, and I was thinking actually earlier today about the Western Conference going, some of these teams they're making moves as if they're trying to climb the ladder, but the West is just so loaded this year. I mean, you really look at the bottom of the West, you look at 8 through 12 right now. Okay, 8 through 12. Actually, let me pull up the standings real quick to talk about this a little bit more accurately than off the top of my head, because I know some of the standings may have changed tonight with the games going on. But ultimately, you look at 8 through 12, okay? So right now, the 8 seed is the Dallas Mavericks. Okay. They were actually the 11 seed last night. So they move all the way up to 8 after the win against the Boston Celtics tonight. Then you have the Sacramento Kings at 9. You have the Suns at 10. You have the Warriors at 11. The Spurs at 12. Okay. You look at 8 through 12 right now. Those are 5 teams. 4 of those teams are missing the playoffs outright. 4 out of the Mavericks, Kings, Suns, Warriors, Spurs. The Spurs made the De'Aaron Fox move, of course, so they're now 2 games back of the 11. I really wouldn't rule them out, potentially making a run. The Suns are just a really weird team. I think their energy is just I would not be surprised if they end up in that 12 spot at the end of the year. They do have a lot of talent that could keep them from that spot, but just in terms of their team chemistry, it's just all off. There's a lot of trade talk. Is Kevin Durant going to go here? The front office wanted to move him. Bradley Beal didn't want to remove his no trade clause or waive it for him to be traded anywhere. But you have the Warriors, who of course go out and grab Jimmy Butler. And the Kings, they move off of De'Aaron Fox. They give him to a team that's actually below them right now in the standings, but then they go and receive Zach LaVine and Jonas Valanciunas from that. And then the Mavericks, they of course move off of Luka Dončić. And the Mavericks, they receive Anthony Davis, and all of those teams right there made some sort of a move at the deadline. The Suns, I mentioned them. They also moved off of Yusuf Nurkic's money at the deadline. But 4 of those teams are missing the playoffs. It's a really tight race in the Western Conference. You have 3 teams actually tied right now for the 9 seed. The Mavericks are 1 game ahead in the 8 seed, and then the Spurs are 2 games back in that 12th spot. And then the 13, 14, 15 Blazers, Jazz, Pelicans. I'm sorry, they're not going anywhere. Unfortunately, that's where they're ending for the season. Blazers are actually doing a lot better this season than most people thought, already up to 22 wins on the year. So maybe they're a team that moves up next year. But you just look at the West, it is so loaded. The Kings, that's why I kind of think with this move right here with the Kings, the LaVine and Valanciunas trade, or I should say they're separate trades, but them acquiring Valanciunas and LaVine, I don't know where it puts them in the Western Conference. I liked obviously the acquisitions of Jimmy Butler a lot more for the Warriors, and De'Aaron Fox a lot more for the Spurs. But even the Mavericks, I thought the Mavericks kind of made themselves worse at the deadline. The Suns, I don't know if they really leave the deadline as a better team. And you just look at all the squads there. I wonder, I'm like, you look at the teams at the top too. You got the Thunder, who are just running away with the conference right now, but the Grizzlies, they're playing really well. Nuggets 3, Rockets 4. That can fluctuate any night. The Nuggets were 4 actually last night. And then you have the Lakers and Clippers sitting there. And then the Timberwolves and the Clippers are actually tied for 6. But those are all quality teams at the top, 1 through 6. If you go through them, and 7 is the Timberwolves. I should have mentioned 1 through 7. But it's like, where is that leeway to actually move up in the standings? Who's that team that's gonna be injured? Who's that team that's actually gonna fall off? All these Western Conference teams are making moves in order to get better, but I really wonder if it's kind of a fallacy in terms of a lot of these teams are kind of going like this. They're not going like this with these moves because they made themselves only slightly better in a conference that is just completely loaded. But speaking of the Western Conference, there are 2 more Western Conference teams we're going to get to tonight before we wrap up the show. And one of those teams is a significant Western Conference team. And I just mentioned them at the 5 slot in the Western Conference at 29-19. We have the Los Angeles Lakers, who traded Dalton Connect. Dalton Connect, which I was very shocked to see his name come off the board. Especially knowing it could have came off the board for the Luka trade, did not whatsoever. They retained him, but the Los Angeles Lakers go and trade for Mr. Mark Williams from the Charlotte Hornets. Now, Mark Williams is not a name that a lot of people know because he's been buried on the Charlotte Hornets, not necessarily in their rotation, just the fact of a lot of people, I'm sure, don't watch the Charlotte Hornets because they're just a terrible, terrible basketball team. If you do, maybe you're watching because of LaMelo Ball. But Mark Williams is a quality center in the NBA, a very young center in the NBA, a center that can really fit next to Luka Dončić and LeBron James. His main concern is, of course, his health and staying on the floor. Almost, his last name's Williams. We know another Williams who was kind of like that, and we just talked about the Blazers, Mr. Robert Williams. The best ability is availability, of course, out there. Mark Williams, that's his biggest question. But if he can stay on the floor for the Los Angeles Lakers, this could be a quality move for the Lakers, getting themselves the big man that everybody was talking about when the Luka Dončić move went down. Oh, who's going to be the center for the Los Angeles Lakers? Well, Mark Williams is certainly going to add to that rotation, while Dalton Connect, the Charlotte Hornets, they're just getting a nice player in Dalton Connect for Mark Williams, knowing, oh, I got Mark Williams on the roster. We're not going anywhere with him. Hey, maybe we can build around Dalton Connect going into the future. Not as a 1A star or anything, but certainly a player that could be in the future for the Charlotte Hornets.
Yeah, the Dallas or Los Angeles Lakers have definitely improved their roster and made this a prominent year to make a final lead towards a championship, and also to get some young talented players on their roster as well as they traded away Dalton Connect, which I'm very surprised because I thought he was going to be one of those future centerpieces that would be around post LeBron when he decides to retire from the game, and that being either, who knows, it could be early as this off season, and what I'm predicting is going to be probably next season will probably be his last year. He'll make the whole LeBron parade, be going from away team to an away team, people giving him pieces of the plaque or pieces of the parquet and like gifts. Like, I don't know what was the last prominent one. Derek Jeter was the one that comes to mind who really oversold it. But I think the Lakers really have put together a very solidified starting five, along with the depth talent that they have is good enough to get through some of these series. The Charlotte Hornets are an interesting team now. I think adding is a rough move, especially for what they're trying to develop there in the future. And they've been kind of in a stagnated place for a long time, but they still have a lot of promising young talent. Now you get to match Dalton Connect, who has shown some promise in LA with LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller, and so those three could become a talented trio moving forward. Miles Bridges as well. He's a more experienced player, but not too old to be leaving him out of future plans. But and I believe that the Hornets also added Yusuf Nurkic after this trade, if that's correct. So they were able to address that, fill in, and but I think they're one of those teams that are outside that that bracket of competing for a play-in position. Unfortunately, the Charlotte Hornets are a team who usually have accept their laurels and where they lie at the bottom of the division. Obviously, they're trying not to be as bad as the Washington Wizards, and I think they're going to be making a push for that the lottery for this year. So it's going to be interesting to see where the how the NBA draft picks fall for the teams and who's going to be able to make that claim for Cooper Flag.
Capture the flag. That's what it's all
Capture the
about.
flag. Yeah.
What it's all about in the NBA right now. And the Charlotte Hornets, I mean, you talk about them trying not to be as bad as the Wizards, but I don't know how I could say that when they've lost 3 times to the Wizards this year, and the Wizards only have 7 wins on the year. And the Wizards, I mean, half of those are coming against the Charlotte Hornets. I mean, they're certainly in a desperate spot. I'm not a huge believer in some of the culture builders they have there in Charlotte. LaMelo Ball, I don't see him as a culture builder. I think he's actually a very overrated player. I think he's a phenomenal offensive player. Defensively, not giving you anything whatsoever. Brandon Miller, I think I'm not going to completely call him out, but there were some personality concerns going into the league with Brandon Miller. And when you bring him to a team with no culture whatsoever and no sense of building around themselves, I think that has to be a concern when you're bringing a player with potential personality problems within a locker room. Now, he hasn't caused any problems in the NBA or anything like that so far, but I don't really see him as a tone setter, a culture builder there. And that's really the 2 players you're relying on is LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller. But now you have Connect. This is kind of it's a good move for the Hornets, no doubt, but I still see it as the Hornets. I don't know where they're going in the future with this particular team. I don't really see them competing all that much with the current squad of LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller there. But staying on the Lakers point, Luka Dončić, of course, traded to the Los Angeles Lakers. this past week, surprisingly. So, and that's part of also why Mark Williams was traded to the Los Angeles Lakers, because you get rid of Anthony Davis, you got your center depth essentially, and Luka Dončić, he really paired well next to Gafford, really paired well next to Derek Lively in Dallas, and now you pair Mark Williams with Luka Dončić in Los Angeles, and I believe that that could be a nice little addition to the Lakers with Luka, and that could be a lob threat, a rim running lob threat for the Lakers. Mark Williams, his defense, we'll see how that really plays out in Los Angeles. It's certainly not going to be any all defensive showing like we saw from Anthony Davis, but the Lakers, they of course get Luka Dončić at this trade deadline, and now they're going to move Mr. Dalton Connect for Mark Williams. So I don't know if we talked a long time about the Luka Dončić trade, just kind of throwing it up here on the bottom of the screen just to get it down there. Showing people again, we do have a 37-minute special out on Luka Dončić. Of course, everybody go check that out. We were talking about it the other night, but another team involved in that deal was ultimately the Dallas Mavericks, who of course acquired Anthony Davis from the Los Angeles Lakers for Luka Dončić. Now the Mavericks, they pair Anthony Davis with not Kawhi Leonard, LOL. Both of them were in LA in 2019, both acquired by the Lakers and Clippers. But for Anthony Davis and Kyrie Irving now on the same team, that was a pairing that could have potentially happened in Boston all the way in back in 2019 with Irving hitting free agency, Anthony Davis on the trade market by the Pelicans at the time, wanted out of New Orleans. But of course, Anthony Davis, he landed with the Los Angeles Lakers. And then now, 6 years later, the Los Angeles Lakers, after winning one title with Anthony Davis inside the bubble in 2020, move on from AD, trade him to the Mavericks for Luka Dončić. You have to do that every single time. Luka, 25-year-old superstar. I mean, the Lakers, they made out in this deal. Anthony Davis is tremendous. Is a tremendous player, but at the same time, if you only have to give up Anthony Davis, Max Christie, and a future first for Luka Dončić, who could be setting you up for the next 10 years, that's certainly something you do if you're the Los Angeles Lakers. But the Mavericks, certainly a perplexing move by the Mavericks at the deadline to give up Luka Dončić at 25 years old. Conditioning concerns, I don't see that at all. I understand Luka. He's not the most in shape player, but the way he plays, I mean, look at Nikola Jokic in the past. He was not seen as the most in shape player, the most conditioned player, but the way he plays, it doesn't matter. Plus, he actually came around from that standpoint. You look at Jokic today; he's a highly conditioned player in the NBA, multi-time MVP. That's probably going. That's what's going to happen with Luka Dončić as well. Going to pair up next to LeBron James. Going to have extra motivation. There's no worry from my standpoint. I don't know what he does behind the scenes. There's no worry about conditioning for Luka Dončić from my perspective when he's 25 and can still play the way he plays, even whether he was out of shape or not. I mean, maybe it's more the injury concerns in time. But the Dallas Mavericks, they do acquire Anthony Davis from the Lakers in that deal, and the Mavericks, they're getting an all defensive starting center and somebody who can be an all NBA member this year, potentially. He is an all-star this year. It's not as if the Mavericks don't have pieces to go out there and, I don't want to say contend with, but compete with in the Western Conference. But I certainly think the Mavericks, their ability to actually go out and potentially make the finals goes down to me after this trade, because I thought Luka, he's one of the best half-court players in the entire NBA. And you take one in the playoffs, it's all about playing in the half court. And when you take the best half court player in the NBA off your roster, really one of the two in terms, one's Jokic, the other's Luka. In the Western Conference, you can talk about Shea, you can talk about Tatum, whoever you want, Giannis as well. But really, Luka and Jokic are the gold standard for that. When you take Luka Dončić off your roster and add Anthony Davis, I understand you're going up a defensive level, but you're taking so much away from an offensive standpoint. But I do want to talk about a deal in which the Mavericks made outside of this Luka Dončić trade, just touching on that, which was the Caleb Martin deal. The Mavericks acquire Caleb Martin from the Philadelphia 76ers. They send out a pick, and they send out Quentin Grimes, and Quentin Grimes wasn't a huge rotation piece for the Dallas Mavericks. But of course, the Mavericks get Caleb Martin in return. The Celtics are certainly lucky they did not see Caleb Martin tonight, because then it would have been a 30-point loss for the Boston Celtics. if he was, of course, active at the TD Garden. Of course, not active tonight for the Dallas Mavericks after being acquired today, or rather tomorrow or yesterday, from the Philadelphia 76ers. But the Mavericks, where do you feel the Mavericks are actually going to finish this year, Franco? Do you see them in the play-in, or do you see them actually getting into that top six and being a Western Conference contender like we saw last year?
I actually was. I already have my playoff script already written out. I don't know if we want to dump that out at this point of the post game show, or do we? We'll probably want to save it on for later on this season, or probably during playoff break. Or All Star break. I'll release it, but I have the Nuggets finishing around the 7th or 8th seed this season, and going in, I don't see them having that same type of contention and flair as they did going on. I think that they'll match up with the first or second seed in the NBA playoffs, and unfortunately be eliminated in the first round. I think they have done enough. It reminds me of the Brooklyn Nets team, but in a different sense, in a different light. I think they're some good, talented players that I don't know if they're at a point in their careers where they can carry on with the challenge that they have set in front of themselves, and don't know if they can really contribute at the levels that they could have when they wanted to originally put this team together in 2019 here in Boston. Thankfully, Danny Ainge decided to build through succession and through developing this team, because we wouldn't be looking at the amount of success that the Celtics have seen in the past few years. Definitely not with Banner 18 as recently as it happened, but we would be looking at probably a darker path and darker days for the Celtics in the upcoming years, especially with those trades and how much draft capital would have had to be shipped out for Kevin Durant, and Anthony Davis to be a part of this team. I think that you're going to see the Mavericks really put together a competitive team, not a contending team. Caleb Martin, obviously, we know how what he can bring to the basketball court when it comes down to playoff time, and he's one of the top 5 Celtics killers in recent history. But it's a questionable offensive layout that they're going to be putting out there, especially the starting 5. Anthony Davis is going to be transferring back to being a power forward with the Dallas Mavericks. I thought that Daniel Gafford possibly could have been moved today and would have allowed that flexibility to have Anthony Davis be the center, and they acquire another forward and can put Caleb Martin in the starting lineup. But you're going to be looking at probably Kyrie running the point guard, which he's been more used to running the shooting guard since he's joined the Dallas Mavericks, and has found quite some success doing it. But tonight you saw he had absolutely no problem running the one. You have Klay Thompson playing more of a shooting guard role, and then PJ Washington will probably be the starting small forward, if not Caleb Martin. But they're going to be a team that will be a little bit more well-rounded, but don't have that superstar and really that tier 1 type player that Luka Dončić is, to really put them over the edge, which is what teams have needed in recent history to have an NBA chance at an NBA championship.
Yeah, Kyrie Irving and Anthony Davis, they're two tremendous players, and they were 2 top 10 NBA players. at a certain point in time. Even Klay Thompson was a top 10 NBA player at a certain point in time, but that point in time has passed us now. And the big three of Anthony Davis, Kyrie Irving, and Klay Thompson, if you can even call it that, well, they're ready for a run at the 2019 NBA Finals. Unfortunately, they're 6 years behind on that pursuit, of course, because the Mavericks at this point in time, they just, to me, that this is a win now scenario for the Dallas Mavericks. And when they use that language on the Anthony Davis tweet, it was kind of funny because you're going to a situation that just traded Luka Dončić away, but at the same time, it is still a situation where the Mavericks, it is win now. It is Kyrie Irving is over 30 years old. Anthony Davis is over 30 years old. Klay Thompson is well over 30 years old, and all of those players, it's either win now or later on. The Mavericks, they're not, they don't have a future anymore without Luka Dončić. They don't really have that 10-year future. It's cut down to really, people say, oh, 2-3 years. I would say it's this year, next year. You might get another year after that. I don't really think that's certain. And Kyrie and Anthony Davis, they've certainly been two players in which you look at and go, they have not been the most durable players whatsoever within their NBA careers at all. So I think this move for the Dallas Mavericks, just getting Anthony Davis and putting together the squad now, a little confusing. And I don't see them making it back to the NBA Finals now all of a sudden. I thought with Luka Dončić on the roster and the roster they had, if Derek Lively could come back healthy, I think it was certainly a possibility that they could go and make the same run they did last year in the Western Conference. But at this point in time, the Mavericks, I think they just kind of shot themselves in the foot at the trade deadline. Even though you have some nice players, you acquired some nice players, and Anthony Davis, Max Christie we saw tonight, and Caleb Martin we're talking about as well. It doesn't reach the level of Luka Dončić. It just straight up does not reach a level of the 25-year-old Luka Dončić. You really look at his film, the playmaking ability is seriously some of the greatest playmaking ability you will ever see on a basketball court. And the Mavericks, they gave that up for 31-year-old Anthony Davis, who people did not want to touch the last 3 years because of his injury issues. And I heard somebody earlier, I hate to not credit them, I forgot who it was, but when your nick, I think it was A. Sherrod Blakely actually. When your nickname is Street Clothes, probably not the most durable available player out there, and that's who the Dallas Mavericks, of course, got at this year's trade deadline. But for us, that does wrap up all of the trades today. Some of the major ones, we had our trade deadline special earlier. Everybody go check that out, of course. But tonight we utilized the back end of the post-game show from the Celtics and the Mavericks game to talk about all these trades, because the Celtics and Mavericks game was just horrendous for the Boston Celtics, and there was not too much to talk about after we talked for 2 hours the other night on the Cavs game. And tonight it was just a poor showing from the Boston Celtics. But ultimately, everybody go check out our trade deadline special, as we did air that earlier this afternoon. We were live for about 2.5 hours. We're actually going on 2.5 hours on this post-game show right now, although we did turn it into the trade deadline special part 2. And we went over a lot of deals that we really didn't touch on a whole lot earlier today, but we did here in this particular slot in our time segments, our post game, or I should say our recording sessions. So everybody go check out the trade deadline special, of course, out there right now. And that should wrap it up for us tonight. I'm going to give a couple seconds of silence there just for the cuts later on in time, but going to be moving back here to the post-game format to close out this show, because that is what it originally started on here for us. So the Celtics, of course, falling to the Dallas Mavericks by 7 points tonight, but it was a much, I will say it was not that close. It was a 27-point deficit at one point for the Boston Celtics. They eventually go and only lose by 7 points because the bench came in down the stretch. And really, at the Celtics, this was just a horrible showing after a great showing in Cleveland. Now, the Celtics will look forward to the New York Knicks on Saturday night. Is it a Saturday night, Franco?
Yeah, Saturday.
Oh, I got the day right. Thank goodness. I got the day right on that one. But the New York Knicks, the Celtics will be at the not TD Garden. They will be at Madison Square Garden on Saturday night to face off with the New York
Hey,
Knicks,
Garden.
who, of course, reside within the city that Franco runs. We will have you guys covered here on the Celtics Talk Weekly post-game show that night. But Franco, any lasting thoughts from tonight? Just any lasting thoughts from this post-game show?
This team can't short this inconsistent run again. After the 4-game win streak they went on, I wouldn't say that my confidence from those 4 wins has faded to nothing after this loss to the Dallas Mavericks. I think the Dallas Mavericks had a lot to prove tonight. This was a game that Nico Harrison and the Dallas Mavericks kind of needed to win, and was kind of a must-win for them, especially with the waters that they'll be treading into after such a monumentous trade happening, and there not really being much of an answer. And the only way to even please a Dallas Mavericks fan who hasn't burned their $100 77 Luka jerseys yet is to win games and try to prove to them that this isn't the worst thing to happen. And I mean, I just really think that there's no excuse for the Celtics to take it easy, to underestimate their opponent. And it's not something the Celtics, I don't think the Celtics will do against the New York Knicks. They obviously know that the New York Knicks have always been that on paper contending team with the Celtics, that classroom table talk conversation team with the Boston Celtics, how the New York Knicks roster is put together, all the efforts they put into making this team suitable to compete with the Celtics. Karl-Anthony Towns, Anunoby, and Mikal Bridges all coming in to New York this offseason. So I'm just really hoping that this team can put together a confident wire-to-wire win. You're going to need Jason Tatum to show up on a night against the New York Knicks to really shut down Madison Square Garden, and they should be able to confidently walk out with a win against the New York Knicks like they did with the Cleveland Cavaliers on Tuesday.
Yeah, and I will say, I believe the Celtics will show up that night in New York, as it's a big game. But regardless of that, I know who will be showing up. It will be us on the Celtics Talk Weekly post-game show that night. We will have you all covered after the final buzzer, after the Celtics go into New York and potentially grab themselves a nice win and bouncing back from this terrible, terrible Mavericks loss. But that's going to do it for us tonight here on the Celtics Talk Weekly post-game show. I'm your host, Seamus Zarlingo. Alongside of me, wait a minute, over here is Nick Franco. See, you got it right this time. You got it right. No Justin Franks anymore. But that's going to do it for us tonight. We will be back here on Saturday night covering the Knicks and Celtics game. But as I always say at the end of each broadcast, thank you all for listening, and go